Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to Concordia University's ForSpace. Thank you for joining us for the second half of today, which is part one of Digital Skill Share Days. And we're having a series of lightning rounds starting today. This one lightning round is Applied AI. But just to help situate you, if you're just joining us now, we are live streaming to YouTube from ForSpace, and we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. ForSpace, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge with daily activities such as this one, that examine research questions and projects happening across the university. We're also running this as a live stream Zoom meeting. Those of you hopefully already know, but if you have any comments or questions, pop those into the chat here in the space. Just raise your hand, we'll bring a microphone around. You have questions later? Okay, our moderator for the lightning round for today, my pleasure to pass it over to the learning experience designer at Concordia, Ping. Ping, welcome.
Thank you, Doug. Hello, everybody. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all to the first lightning round of the day. My name is Ping. I'm just here to introduce the real stars of the show today, our wonderful presenters. And just a reminder that this is the first of 4 rounds, so if you have time today, please do consider sticking around. I think we have some great lightning rounds lined up for everybody today. So very quickly, if you're not familiar with the format, it's going to be a series of really short presentations, 5 minutes-ish, followed by a 5-minute question and answer period. So maybe 1 or 2 questions. Of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the speakers afterwards to continue the conversation. So that's all I'm going to say. So I'm going to start with our first presenter, Melissa from the library. So Melissa, it's yours.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, perfect. Hi, so I'm going to talk about techniques for effective prompting. So when we want to get the most out of Gen AI tools, there's a few prompting techniques that you can experiment with to see what gets you your desired output in the end. So prompting frameworks can be good to start with, as it provides a foundation for different criteria that you may want to think about when forming your query or your prompt. It does take some crafting and a little bit of fine-tuning to adapt your questions or commands in order to get the desired results and the output that you want. So as Ethan Mollick wrote in his blog post from the fall, Getting Started with AI, Good Enough Prompting, working with AI is a dialogue and not an order. So the quality of our prompts affects the quality of the output that we're getting when we're working with Gen AI tools. And when we're first trying out these tools, it's important to kind of start simple. It's an iterative process, and you need to experiment with it. So one technique is to use the CLEAR framework developed by Leo Lowe, which gives 5 core principles that guide users to obtain more effective results. So being concise, so using as few words as possible to say what you need, nothing really extra to distract from the AI. It's crucial to really provide that clarity. Any unclear or imprecise instructions may give results that don't really meet your needs or what you expected. Being logical, so most Gen AI tools look for relationships between words or concepts. And so you want to make sure that your prompt presents concepts accurately and in their natural or logical order as well. So if your question doesn't really make sense to you or someone else, the AI is probably not really going to understand it also. And be explicit. So don't assume that the Gen AI knows what you're asking for directly. So give as much context as possible, such as a role or type of output that you're looking for. Use strong action verbs like define, summarize, translate. Asking the AI to take on a role or persona can sometimes be helpful, but be cautious, as Mollick also says that it sometimes lowers the accuracy. So try out roles, but you don't need to use them if they're not really useful for the situation that you're in. Be adaptive. So you, as the creator of the prompt, need to respond to the tool's outputs and reformulate things when needed. So try a second prompt, use keywords or topics suggested by the AI in its answer. And if the tool allows you to specify words or concepts to exclude or ignore, you can you refine your prompt by excluding these concepts? Other ways that can help give the AI more clarity is by providing examples of good or bad responses. This is called few-shot prompting, and giving exact directions on what you want it to provide to you. And be reflective. Was the initial response good or bad? What about the initial prompt that led to that outcome that you got? What follow-up questions resulted in the best improvements? What could you do to make future interactions more efficient? Is the answer complete, or are there perspectives or voices that are underrepresented in the answer as well? So be critical about that output that you're getting. Think about how to reformulate to get better outputs or understand why you got the result that you did in the first place. There's another framework that I recommend using. It's called CRISP, or Crispy as I like to say, CRISPE. This one looks at capacity and role, so defining the role or capacity that you want the AI to take on. Insight would be providing any necessary background information, and then having that statement would be the core of your prompt, really, like what you want the AI model to do. And then personality. Define the tone, so the style or manner that you want in the response that you want to get. I like this framework because it reminds me to think about tone in my response, so that's why I use this one a little bit more often. And experiment. Ask for multiple responses in a specific output type. So if you want a report, a list, an email, then have that dialogue with the AI in refining one or more of the options as well. In preparation for today's lightning round, I actually asked Google Gemini to give me 3 examples of frameworks for effective prompting, and one was the ABC framework, so action, background, constraints. Another was precision, precise, relevant, exemplary, concise, iterative, specific, original, and novel. And 5 W1H, so who, what, where, when, why, and how. They all in some way incorporate the ideas of being precise and adding context to your prompting. When I asked ChatGPT, it gave me the CLEAR framework, the STAR framework, so situation, task, action, and result, and 5W1H. And Perplexity gave me SPEAR, start, provide, explain, ask, rinse, and repeat. CARE, context, action, result, and example, and then RTF, which is role, task, and format. And of these options, I like Perplexity as an option that it gave because it also linked to a really good article from Business Development Bank of Canada about AI prompting, and more of an explanation for the SPEAR and the CARE and the RTF frameworks. So really, no matter which kind of technique you try out, it's important to test out different ones for different situations, and also with different AI tools to see what the variety is that you're going to get, and to really evaluate what works and what you feel works best for your scenario as well. So it might be even helpful to create a prompt library to keep track of prompts that work well, that you've tested, so that you can reuse them in the future. And I also just want to mention that I gave a more detailed workshop on this at last year's Digital Skillshare. That should still be available to view if that is of interest to look at more live demos as well of these frameworks. So thank you.
Thank you for the great overview, Melissa. I think maybe we have time for one question. If there's someone in the room has a burning question, or someone online. Oh, I think we have
Hi,
some.
we'll bring a microphone to you.
Hi, thanks very much for that great summary. And it sounds like you did a lot of research on the different frameworks that are out there just to come up with, try them and see what works for you. I wondered if you saw in your research, for example, I use a generative AI to help with writing an email, for example, but then sometimes I'll help it figure out Excel. So how do I do a formula that gets me this, or how do I write something really nice and flowery? Did you see that did you come across a framework that was a little bit more geared towards something more Excel technical that could help with that, or was it really try any of these in any of the contexts?
Most of what I had been looking at was Gen AI in the context of text generation and a bit more on the image generation side. So I haven't explored as much on that more technical. I don't know if my colleagues here have explored any of those as well, but I'd be happy to talk a little bit more. Yeah, we can chat after. Please don't hesitate. My name's Melissa, so you can just reach out and we can chat a little bit more.
Thank you. So if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to Melissa. Now we're going to move to our second presenter, Andrei from UCS, who's going to be demonstrating a few AI tools for us today. So Andrei, it's all yours.
Thank you. So in fact, that was a perfect question and also perfect segue into what I'm going to talk about, which is how to toggle different AI models on the fly. So of course we can do it through accessing different apps or different web pages. But what I'm going to show and kind of showcase is a particular application called Cursor, where it's super easy. So Cursor is primarily an app for writing code, but in my opinion, there's nothing too complicated about it, and it's perfect to write anything, right? I mean, it's just a text editor. But what's really neat about it, and it's unlike anything I've seen, is that it has AI literally at the front and center of this tool. So as an example, so here's like some text that I prepared for this presentation, and here I toggle the chat window right here. And what's really cool is that you can see right here I have access to all sorts of different popular, common large language models. And in the settings, you see that out of the box, there's a bunch that are already available, and there's some you can add yourselves. Like where you see the little X are some models that I added myself that I can use. And you can even go further and use your own API keys or a local model integrated into this tool. I haven't done this yet, but I know Francisco is presenting on running local models tomorrow, so I'll be super interested in hearing that. And also, I'll be doing a deeper dive into Cursor and another tool called Obsidian for note-taking into how to really leverage all these things in detail. But for this presentation, I'm just going to show you like a quick demo of what this looks like. So I put together this funny, silly prompt. In one sentence, justify why it's good that I secretly use AI to do all of my work so I can nap during office hours. So first, let's see what GPT-4o will tell us. So using AI to handle your work can increase efficiency and productivity, allowing you to focus on strategic tasks and maintaining a better work balance. So very literal. Thank you very much. So let's see Claude. So Claude Haiku, for example. So Claude is made by Anthropic, and Anthropic is known as a company to be very safety first, ethics first type of company. So not surprising. I apologize, but I cannot and will not provide advice that encourages unethical workplace behavior, as this would involve fraud, theft of wages, etc. So this is a pretty unique, well, not unique, but a very much different take on this question. So we'll save DeepSeek R1 for last. Let's see what Gemini, so that's a Google model, will tell us. So also very, very much resistant to this question. I'm programmed to be helpful and a harmless AI assistant. I cannot assist you with this unethical behavior. But what's interesting, I remember seeing that actually a different Gemini model actually did provide an answer. Not this one, but maybe, where's my other one? This one. So this is another Google model. So let's see what this one will say. So that's another actually interesting thing. Some of them are slower, some of them are faster. So really depending on what you're looking for, like right here, I'm kind of losing interest. So if I just want like a dialogue where I'm just kind of brainstorming, I would probably not use this model. In fact, maybe something's wrong in this particular one. But for example, some of the later OpenAI models, such as O1, the O1 mini version anyways, it's a bit slow. So again, if I'm trying to kind of rapid fire brainstorm, I would probably not rely on this particular model. So the most interesting at this time and day and time is the DeepSeek R1, which really kind of shook up the AI world. So it's the reasoning model. So if I ask this, the question, so what's really cool about this model, as probably a lot of you already know, it reasons first, it thinks, and you can see its train of thought, which is so fascinating. So I'm not going to read it all, but it just kind of tries to analyze what I'm trying to ask it, and it's seeing that it's kind of like there's some ethical, some moral questions about this particular question, and it gives the following answer. While leveraging AI to automate routine tasks can enhance efficiency and free up time for strategic thinking, it's crucial to maintain transparency and ensure work quality aligns with professional responsibilities. So pretty spot on. So, so yeah, that's my lightning round. Thank you.
Anyone has a question about this kind of usage? Or maybe online as well, if there's any questions? Oh, I think we have two. We'll just, maybe we can just take one question. Thank you.
I see this question right here.
Thank you. Actually, I have a really quick question. I was just curious what DeepSeek would say to that prompt.
Yeah, that's the last one.
Oh, okay.
DeepSeek R1. Yeah,
I
that's it. So
Okay.
actually, very, very good answer. And honestly, DeepSeek generally, specifically the R1 model, they also have the V3 model, which is also quite good. But yeah, it's pretty good, pretty good. And again, like specifically to my presentation, what's really neat is this application cursor. As soon as DeepSeek came out, they integrated into this application. And what else is kind of cool is that because DeepSeek is an open source model, the API that's being requested is not the official China one. It goes through another company in the States. So specifically for some privacy concerns.
All right.
Cool, thank you.
Oh, we might not have time for more than one question, but please. Okay, well, we can end on the one.
I just want to ask, like, is your experiences with this for quite a while? Like, do you have like favorite models to do different things? Like, is a code model better? Or this is better for this type of stuff? And like, I don't know if you can give us some examples of that.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. So yeah, I definitely have favorites from the style of writing and just the kind of the feel of it. In the past, it has been Haiku, which is a Claude model. I find it to be fast and pretty nuanced. But because the advancement of AI is moving so fast, I almost feel like Anthropic is a little bit behind at the moment. They haven't released anything exciting since 5 months ago, which right now in AI terms, this is like years. It's hilarious. So I've been mostly experimenting with R1, but R1 is a bit slower because it takes a little while for the whole prompt to finish. But when I'm doing some kind of deeper stuff, I use R1. But for quick stuff, and especially for coding, my go-to is GPT-4o Mini, because typically it's super fast and spot on.
All right, thank you, Andrei. Reminder that Andrei is doing a session tomorrow, so if you want to follow him and follow up with him, you can attend his session. So our next presenter is Alicia from CTL, so it's all yours.
Hi, thank you. So I'm actually going to speak to my work in teaching. I teach part-time, and I started using AI about 2 years ago to help me in the development of my courses. So the first thing I did was a graduate course I was teaching in education, and the assignments were kind of application-based assignments, but we were learning some new concepts and I wanted them to have practice. So I decided to try my luck and see how well ChatGPT could create some test banks for them to practice. So these were ungraded questions. And the great thing is in Moodle, if you're familiar with Moodle, if you do it in a certain format, you can upload a whole bunch of questions at once. So I trained it to write in a specific format. So the output was like, okay. It gave me a good base, but some of the distractors were too easy or too hard or didn't make sense in the context. So I did have to go and make some work, but it saved me probably hours of work of having to create questions. So that was great. So I used both the knowledge that it had, and I also inputted some of my own slides, for example, or content. So that's how I got my start, and then I started to see how it could apply to other aspects of course design. And shortly after, I started teaching in the engineering department, and I'm not an engineer. So coming from education, it was a bit of a shift for me. And I was teaching writing communication, and I still am teaching writing communication to engineers. And so a lot of the textbooks, the writing textbooks, they're all about social topics. And I wanted to bring actual engineering topics to them. So I found it really, really helpful in coming up with very specific engineering examples from different fields, because all my students come from different fields. So this was one of the main things that it really helped with. So we were doing a lot of technical examples, writing definitions, writing descriptions of technical objects and mechanisms, etc. So this was really helpful. But at the course level too, as I was most recently designing a course I was teaching for the first time, it was really helpful as a planning tool. So to help me refine my learning outcomes, I had an idea what assignments I wanted to do, and vaguely what the criteria were, but I asked it, and it gave me a nice, beautiful list of criteria, which then I was able to refine to my needs a little bit more. So it saved me some time in that aspect. And probably the biggest thing it has helped me with, and I was just working on this on the weekend, is one of the final projects is for the students to debate on a technical topic and write a recommendation report on a technical topic. And again, so I had to provide them case studies and scenarios of very specific situations. And again, as somebody who doesn't have a background in engineering and a lot of these topics, I was able to use actually DeepSeek. I tried ChatGPT first a couple of weeks ago, and then when DeepSeek came out, I tried DeepSeek, and it was able to actually provide really detailed case studies for me to use with the students. And so I provided an option of like about 9 or 10, and they were able to choose which one they want to do. And so provided a debate statement and then also a case study for them to write a recommendation report. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, but so in terms of course design, it's been really helpful in terms of saving myself a lot of time. And for preparing for lectures, as I mentioned before, I use it a lot for just coming up with examples, text examples, sentence examples when I'm teaching the language aspect. But also sometimes if it's something I've never taught before, if it's been a long time, I'll ask it to come up with a lecture outline for me and even generate slides. And usually it's very general, but I can kind of take that structure and start working. So it kind of takes the brainstorming piece out of the equation, and I can get started on the more detailed work. So that's been really helpful. And sometimes I use it to help me create polling questions if you're using like Mentimeter or something like that to add a little bit of engagement. And occasionally to help me come up with like group kinds of activities, discussion types of activities, I'll ask it to generate some ideas. So far that's what I've been using it for, and I can tell you it's been a real time saver.
Do we have any questions for Alicia?
For those of you online, feel free to type your questions into the chat, or you can use the raise hand function and we'll call on you to ask your question. Do we have any questions in the space? I see one back here.
Thank you. So far, it's a great presentation. I'm just curious, might be a little bit out of context, but are all these models only in English, or is it available in other languages?
Oh, can you ask ChatGPT to create these in other languages? I know you can do it in French. I'm not sure about other languages. Yeah.
Do we have time for another question?
I think so, yeah.
Wonderful.
One more question.
Sure. I just thought I'd ask, sorry, little cough there. Sounds like there's so many great advantages. What would be the major sticking point or trouble or things to watch out for people who are trying to get started using ChatGPT to save themselves or using large language models to save themselves some time?
That's a very good question. So for example, I was trying to come up with different kinds of fallacies in my argumentation class, and so I was asking, I can't remember if it was DeepSeek or ChatGPT for these examples, and they were just wrong. So you have to know what you're talking about, right? You have to be able to check and verify. You can't just blindly use what it produces for you. So that's probably the biggest disadvantage, but I mean, that's what we're here for. We're here to be the experts. But it gave me some ideas. I was just able to change the sentence.
All right, thank you so much, Alicia. And our last but not least presenter, Ali from eConcordia. So please go ahead, Ali.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to talk about another research and writing Gen AI tool today. I always love to get my PhD, but something scared me so much. I had friends who were passionate but completely buried under mountains of articles, books, notes, and papers. Their desk looked like a library had exploded. So I still remember them looking at their desk and say something around the line of, I wish I had an assistant who could read all of these and tell me what to do now. So where should I go? What do I need to do? Fast forward today, 10 years after that, let's say, conversation I had with my friends, their wish has almost come true. So one tool that I want to talk about today is Google's NotebookLM, which is a research and writing tool that allows users to upload various source materials. So you can put documents, web pages, audios, YouTube videos, your own notes, anything you have into its notebook. Then the AI synthesizes the information, provides summaries, outlines, study guides, audio overviews. Users even can interact with the AI, asking questions, and then it gives the answers. A concern that researchers normally have is that the AI making up information, hallucinating, or fabricating. But the citation way it links what it answers to the real article you have provided with. So you can fact check, you can verify it's telling the truth or just fabricating. There's an audio feature which creates podcast-like audio summaries that synthesizes the uploaded document. So two AI-generated hosts start talking about all those resources you have come up with. It makes connections with the topic and provide an engaging way to digest the information. 2 months ago, in December 2024, Google enhanced, let's say, its audio overview, so you can join the conversation. You can raise a hand, ask a question, and then you can take part in the conversation in the podcast. So they answered the question, so you can ask a follow-up question. So I want to show you how it works. So if you can show the video, it would be nice to see it in action, because it's an amazing. So you go to Google, you simply write Notebook Google. The first one is Google Notebook. So yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah, you can hit the play button. Yeah, thanks. So, yeah. Then you can try NotebookLM. Here you create a new project, and then you start adding your resources. As you can see down there, it can be Google Docs, it can be Google Slides, it can be a website, it can be YouTube video, it can be even your own copy text from wherever you want. So I'm going to learn about UDL, so I go and add a resource on UDL. It's a website, udlguidelines.org. I want a Canadian source, so I add another source from the Canadian government on UDL. So I just simply copy the link and paste it here. I have another link from my own computer, so it's a PDF on UDL. So I upload the file simply here. So the file is added, it's a PDF, you can see all those resources added. And I have watched a YouTube video which was really interesting about UDL, so I also copied the link here. And then, as you can see, the 4 resources in the center are listed here, and it gives me a summary. I can add note, I can have an audio overview, and I can have a briefing doc. So I can ask a question, so I will type a random question. For example, what are the, let's say, main issues that with UDL in education today? So very simple random question, and then it starts generating. The interesting thing is that whenever it generates the answer, as you can see, it gives citations. So you can simply know where the information comes from. It's, for example, if I click on one of these, it tells me it comes from the PDF, UDL PDF I put, and it highlights the part of the text that I put. So simply, if you want to make sure it's not fabricating, you can check them. The other one also from the PDF. Or if I click here, it's from the UDL guideline from the Canadian website I put, and it highlights the information. And the very interesting thing is that it can generate audio. It can create podcasts, as I tell you. Simply synthesizes the information. It takes between 5 to 10 minutes, so I fast forward the process for you, so you can listen to the audio very, let's say, with peace of mind. Let's listen to it's a 20-minute thing.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at Universal Design for Learning, UDL for short. And you've sent us some super interesting stuff to dig into. We've got the UDL Guidelines website, of course.
Of course.
A fact sheet from the Teal Center, and then a web page from the Canadian government's Digital Accessibility Toolkit. Now you mentioned you want to go beyond accessibility, right? Like, yeah, UDL helps students with disabilities, but you want those light bulb moments, those aha moments where you see how UDL just makes teaching better, full stop, for everyone.
Right, yeah, it's one of the biggest myths out there that UDL only applies to students with disabilities. And the Canadian toolkit, actually, like that's one of their big points. It benefits all learners, like all.
And you know what? That's already coming through in these sources, even in the Teal Center fact sheet.
So as I said, in the beta model, which was launched 2 months ago, I can go to the conversation. I can simply, when the conversation starts, I can play and ask to
Hey
join.
everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at
So I
universal
want to
design
join the
for
conversation
learning.
now. I hit.
UDL. Hey there. Want to share your thoughts on this?
Sure, I've got a question for you. How does UDL change the way you think about learning?
Well, that's a great question, and it's something we should definitely unpack.
Yeah, it really gets to the heart of what we're going to be talking about today. So it's good to think about it right from the start.
Because, we often think of learning as something that just sort of happens to us.
Right. But when we start talking about UDL, it makes you think about how learning can be, what's really possible.
Exactly. It could be engaging, it could be fun, it could be relevant to your own life.
Yeah, it can be flexible, it can be personalized.
And most importantly, it could be accessible to everyone, no matter your background or your abilities.
So we're going to be looking at how to design
that's
learning
pretty
that
much it.
really takes all those
So
things
probably
into
it's
account.
time for me to get my PhD. Yeah, thank you very much. All right, thank you very much, Ali. Any questions for Ali here, online or in the room?
I see one right here.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. So as a fellow PhD candidate, I'm wondering, in practice, how often do you actually have to go back to the sources to understand the information that was provided and to understand more of the context in which the literature was created?
Honestly, I'm not a researcher, so probably it needs more time and energy. But based on my experiments, because I did a lot of experiments, I added different, let's say, tasks, different resources. I tried to jump in the conversation in the middle, quite towards the end. So, and when I wanted to check with the information that provided, normally it refers back to the sources you have provided. So basically, whenever I checked, it worked. However, it's in an experimental phase, so it might make mistakes. But because you see the answers there and it's highlighted, you can simply check. So definitely needs more, let's say, diligence to go, let's say, make sure it's correct. But based on what I did, it looks quite fine.
Any other questions? We had a question online. This one is from Christopher asking, can the accents or nationalities be changed on how the AI generates podcast presenters?
For this one, no, but there's another tool. Just Google Labs, everybody, please. Go Google labs.google or googles.lab, and you can find it. It provides you with lots of new tools that Google is experimenting with. It's jaw-dropping. There is another tool which is called Google Illuminate, where you can choose 2 or 3 other, let's say, presenters. But no, you cannot have different nationalities or different accents yet. But I'm sure it's going to be there soon.
Any other questions? We have another question online. This question is from Jonathan. Will this workflow reduce new ideas in research as AI is derivative? It finds and paraphrases, right?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, will this workflow reduce new ideas in research?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but
I think the speaker, if I may, is asking, since AI can be derivative and can paraphrase a lot of information, I think they're asking if you think it will reduce new ideas and creativity.
It might, but the point is you're always there to give more prompts, better. You can engineer the prompt, you can give better prompts. So I think no, but basically AI has a side effect which could make people lazy. This is something that we cannot ignore. Let's say just ignore. It's there, as I said. More people might want to do research, something which was cumbersome someday. So, but we cannot say it is the enemy of creativity, which I think people who want to be creative and are creative will find a way using AI to be more creative.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question. Any questions? Yes, I see one.
Hi, just maybe also in answer to the last question, but I'm curious what you think about it. One of the things, and I've done this with NotebookLM as well, is I mostly use it, like you don't need to use it with just one source on one topic. You can use multiple different topics and then have a conversation to link ideas together across those different topics, right? And
Exactly.
a big use case for me is making sure that I've understood the concepts properly. So I will say, here's how I understand this. Is that correct, or am I missing something? And I find like those kinds of approaches to prompting or using the tools as a way not just to generate tons of text or tons of answers for you, but as a way to ask questions and confirm your understanding of things. So in the application, I'm just curious if that's, I know the Interrupt podcast seems to be that opportunity to do that as well, which I really like that feature, but that's how I read those opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's quite possible because I did it. And you give it your notes, your understanding, even it tries to decipher what your understanding is. So you can ask clarification question, you make sure you're on the right track. That's why I think this is a very nice feature, because you simply can make sure your train of thought are making, like leading you towards your learning objectives. You don't get away from the, let's say, main path. And that's what it does. Although you have to be patient with it, you have to, and in the paid feature, you can have longer, let's say, you can add so many other resources, you can make sure there are other things, you can ask questions to include a specific, let's say, a resource you have provided them with, or find the answer from that specific resource, so it's going to be helpful in that regards too.
All right, I think we're all good. I think we're wrapping up the first lightning round. So thank you to all our presenters for the amazing presentation and the food for thought, and hopefully can give you some ideas about potential use cases in your daily life with applied AI. So once again, I'd like to thank our amazing presenters for joining us today. If you have any follow-up questions, I welcome you to reach out to them individually to continue the conversation. So with this, our first round wraps up. We're going on a mini break, and we're all coming back here in 10-15 minutes for our second round, which is Learn Every Day. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Those of you online, you can stick around. We'll be back in about 15 minutes with the next edition.
Oh, they're on my phone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're just going to we're going to jump right into lightning round 2, part of Digital Skillshare Days. Same kind of order of operations. Any questions, comments, please put them into the chat if you're joining us on Zoom, and here in the space, we'll bring a microphone over to you if you have comments and questions. Okay. It's my pleasure to hand things over to our moderator for this panel, Natalie Camirand, who's manager in organization development and human resources. Natalie, it's great to have you.
Thank you very much. So welcome to the second lightning round on Learning Every Day. So in the next 45 minutes, we're going to focus on fostering continuous growth and commit to lifelong learning by integrating in our daily practices learning. So our facilitators will share approach, tips, and tricks to do so in an effective and easy manner. So our three facilitators today will be Kristy Clarke, Manager Graduate Professional Development in the School of Graduate Studies. She's also the chair of the ACUME Professional Development Committee, and she will share how to cultivate a growth mindset. Afterwards, we'll have Jasia Stuart, Manager Digital Capabilities in the library, and she will talk about micro-learning in the Udemy platform. And finally, we'll have Paul Fournier, who's Director Digital Transformation in the Office of the Provost, and he will share the Protégé effect. So just like last time, we'll have each presenter presenting 5 to 10 minutes. Their segment will stop for a 5-minute question from the room or from the people online before moving to the second facilitator. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Kristy.
Thanks very much, Natalie. So yes, I'm Kristy. I'm from the School of Graduate Studies, and I'm the manager of Graduate Professional Development team. I'm going to talk about cultivating a growth mindset, which, since I'm in a university environment here, I'm probably preaching to the converted, especially those who signed up for Digital Skillshare Day. But my goal here is to give you maybe some extra points in convincing others as well in your team and around you about adopting a growth mindset. And to do that, first I'm going to promise to you that in our session, not just me, but also with Jasia and Paul, we're going to give you tips on how to make more money and improve your happiness, which is not something that we can usually promise. So first I'm going to go to the basics and define what a growth mindset is, which is usually defined by its antonym, which is a fixed mindset. So probably no surprises here. Someone with a growth mindset is someone who views intelligence, abilities, and talents as things that are learnable and capable of improving throughout one's life through effort, and the key word being effort. On the other hand, someone with a fixed mindset is someone who sees those traits as unchangeable. That's just the way you were born. When you have a growth mindset, your past does not define your future, and you take failure and feedback as learning opportunities. You see new tasks and difficult situations as ways to gain new skills and discover new ways of working. There's always more to learn, and there must be a better way of doing it. So what are the benefits of a growth mindset? And we can observe these at the individual level, at the team level, and at the organizational level. So I'm going to go through these individually. At the individual level, there's evidence, of course, that it has a positive effect on our mental health. This has been documented. It as decreasing anxiety, depression, stress, etc. It shows us that it develops critical thinking skills, which in turn builds our resilience, the capacity to recover through difficult situations. And not surprising, studies also show that people with a growth mindset are more likely to advance in their career because they are rewarded for their initiative. In the workplace, a growth mindset has shown significant benefits to the team and the organization as it leads to more collaborative work cultures and improved creativity and problem solving. And to no surprise, this drives organizational success because it drives innovation and also employee retention because people want to work in a place where they can also grow and develop. And to illustrate this, a recent American study asked 300 business leaders what their thoughts were on the impact of a growth mindset on their organization, and the result was 80% of them think that it directly drives profits. So, show me the money. So how can we foster a growth mindset in ourselves and others? And as you guessed it, it starts with the mind. You have to have the right attitude. So you need to be someone who's naturally curious about your professional field, about learning about others and their perspectives, and of course, curious about the world around you and how things work. Fundamental to the growth mindset is acknowledging that qualities are learned and changed through effort. You need to be open to take on new challenges, try new projects, take on new tasks. So the effort here is you need to make an effort.
That's where the emphasis is. Try not to get too overwhelmed. See this learning as stimulating. There is a certain level of stress that is stimulating. So, and if you think it's taking on too much is beyond your capacity, well, that's time to have a conversation with your manager, who's ever sort of blocking that capacity. You need to be proactive and seek opportunities. Question, if the process is taking too long, why is that? If your work is being overlooked, why is that? Is your colleague or a client complaining? Well, why is that? Just dig into it. We have to be, often we're too afraid to make mistakes. It's human nature to not want to make mistakes and be scared of that. But as I always tell my kids, it's okay to make mistakes. It's not okay to not learn from your mistakes, but it's okay to make the mistakes. So be kind to others who make mistakes, be kind to yourself, and try to reframe them as learning opportunities. And with that, that means expecting feedback, welcoming feedback, taking it positively, taking the time to process it, and also know how to give feedback in a constructive way to others. So make sure one skill set you need to have is how to give and receive feedback effectively. And of course, feedback can feel personal, but most often it's not. It's really taking the time to situate it, self-reflect, and make the corrective actions. A growth mindset is also about celebrating the journey, not just the results. And oftentimes we can't wait to get to the final episode in a TV series, but we always have the pleasure in watching each episode and watching the story unfold. So remember that as well. Your work and your learning should be approached no differently. Don't put everything on fast forward and try to get to it as quick as possible. There is taking time to slow down and enjoy the process and learn along the way, and find those kind of little micro learning moments and incremental changes you can make can be really rewarding. Don't just do something because you want to be thanked for it afterwards. Do it for yourself and try to learn from it. And sometimes making this shift in your perspective takes away that fear of judgment and allows you to pursue more ambitious work. So putting this into action through habits. If we look at the individual level, first and foremost, we need to be an active listener. As you know, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so try to tune into your colleagues and close ones and listen to what they're saying about you, about your work, and about their interpretation of the world around you. Be social. Join networks, sign up for newsletters, follow a podcast, join a professional association, and I'll just give an anecdotal personal level here. Last year, I took my time to do my project management certification, and I became a member of the PMI, this allows me to kind of read their newsletter and follow up on trends, which is not just on the project management field, but just generally on management, so it's very relevant to my work. Even though it might not be obviously relevant, but very relevant. I get to attend all these webinars on various topics, and I get access to the Resource Center. And so how did I do this? How did I get my PMP? Which goes to my next point, is I used the professional development resources that are available to us as employees of Concordia. So I followed my Udemy prep course, which Jasia will talk about in a moment. I got financial support from Acume through the Professional Development Fund. So if you have access to that through Acume, QPayU, or others, use it. It's there for you. We're fortunate to work in a university where there's so many learning opportunities, be it courses, talks like this at Fourth Space. We have all these special interest topics in the Research Institute. So take advantage of that. It's a great perk of working in the university. And then contrary to my slide, which says create habits instead of making resolutions, I think that there is some advantage to making a resolution. At least on an annual basis, I'd say take that time to sit down either on your own or with your manager and say, okay, what is my professional development goal for this year? What is there a new skill that I could benefit from, and how could I go about doing that? Hatch a plan. And it could be as simple as just nesting or stacking micro learnings into your regular habits, possibly while snacking, but maybe in your drive to work, follow a podcast. If you're taking the metro, and you want to learn a language, download Duolingo. If you like to read during your morning coffee, maybe read the newsletter instead of reading those emails that you really shouldn't be responding to anyways. The other thing at the individual level, I encourage everyone to find a mentor. And even if that may seem a bit daunting, well, maybe just go to lunch with some colleagues once a month and just chew on an issue with them. And that's a great way to surround yourself with other growth-minded people. As a manager or team lead, I think it's also really important to foster growth mindset in your team. This means making time for your team to learn and grow. It means maybe booking time to ideate on a problem, having regular team meetings where each team member gets to present their work to the others so they can hear about it, seeking opportunities to present the work of your team to other teams across the university who might be not aware of what you're doing, booking training in your team's schedule or giving your team members each time to book their own self-learning in their schedule, and of course having one-on-one meetings with your employees to talk about their own professional development. We also need to accept that a growth mindset is not natural to everyone. Some colleagues will need some encouragement, and you need to articulate the value of continuous learning. That's something that you, as a manager or team lead, value. You need to encourage people to bring forward problems and not fair appraisal. And you also need to give them space to voice their concerns and work with them on brainstorming solutions. So it goes without saying, you need to lead by example. And for my last slide, because I'm just about at time, so I just want to say that it's also important to recognize your own learning style, because everyone learns differently, and the way you learn might not be the same way as someone else. So, you know, recognizing, are you someone who learns better in a group? Are you someone who learns more on your own? Are you kind of are you better at retaining things in the morning, in the evening? When is your learning time? My slide here shows visual, auditory, and kinesthetic ways of learning. Thank you. You know, recognizing which ones work best for you, and also learning about how you share your learning with others, because that's also, well, Paul will talk to that in a moment. So that's it for my slide. I'm going to hand it on, but thank you for taking the time and to listen today. And I hope that it gave you a tidbit of something that you can create in a new habit or set as a new learning objective.
Thank you, Kristy. Do we have any question from the room or online?
We do.
Hi, my name's Richard Greco. Great presentation on growth mindset. I think it's very useful. I was talking to my 7-year-old daughter about having a growth mindset just the other day. But I had a question about how you might overcome the bad habits that you might have that are challenging. So changing some habits are a little bit easier than others. Obviously, you know, your slide was talking about changing habits, don't make resolutions. Do you have any experience in overcoming some particularly hard habits to change?
I think recognizing that it's a bad habit is probably the first step in that. And then, what is it they say, 21 days to take or make or break a habit. So I think it's about, you know, making a commitment to changing that and just sticking with it, and reminding yourself, like, when you want to fall off the bandwagon, to just stick with it. Yeah, do you want to add something, don't you, Natalie?
Yeah, I wanted to add also a good way to break a habit is to integrate a new habit.
Yes.
You know, that is not too far from the first one, but that you could slowly graduate, if I may say, to the second habit. Also, that's another tips to break a habit.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Excellent. So I'm going to get started. No, we need to go back. So my presentation is on micro-learning with Udemy, and it's going to be a very much from my point of view and very much a personal story, because I think sometimes it's easy to get into the do as I say, not as I do mentality for some of these didactic, you should use this resource. it's a little bit tricky because I am at a table with Paul Fournier, Natalie, Camirand, and Kristy Clarke, and they're amazing learners. And I can see these are people that every time I talk to them, they're learning something new. They're doing this, they're doing that, and it seems very easy for them. It probably isn't, but this is going to be a little bit of my story and a little bit of some struggle involved. So I hope that you can learn from kind of my approach. It may not work for you, but I'm going to be very honest, and I'm going to present some things, some great resources, and also some big challenges in making the most of them. So microlearning with Udemy. First step for doing anything with Udemy is you do need to sign up. I imagine many people have already activated their accounts, but if you haven't, if you go onto the Concordia's library website and you hit that pink button, big pink button at the top says Learn with the Library, and there's a nice page that explains how to log in and create your Udemy account. So important first step. So I am actually, that's actually part of my portfolio. I am in charge of overseeing Udemy, making sure there's no technical glitches that aren't being addressed, but also helping people to use it and to make good use of it at Concordia. And we're really proud of our uptake. We have about, right now, we have licenses for everyone at the university, staff, faculty, and students, and we have about 14,000 people signed up to use those licenses, which is great. It's an amazing number. We're always having conversations about how wonderful this is. But the other day we looked at a different number, and it's the activity number, and it's about how many people are active every month, and it's about 3,000, 3,000 to 4,000. This is not a bad number. Everyone tells me still it's a very good number, and compared with other institutions like Concordia, our numbers are excellent. However, I found it to be a disappointing number. 14,000 people signed up for Udemy licenses, went on, activated their accounts, and only 3,000 make time every month to actually go on and learn something. I was really like, oh, this is sad. And then I thought about it, and I thought, I haven't been on Udemy this month and done anything. So there was this was a big moment for me where I was like, these people that are just not using Udemy correctly. And then I realized it was actually me. So that was a nice humbling moment to think about, like, what could be different, what could be better, not what people should do better, but what was I going to change in order to make some time. And I'm not saying, I do try and have a growth mindset, but I'm very self-aware. Maybe I'm a little hard on myself and I struggle. So I went to Udemy, to my customer success manager, and I said, hey, this number is not as good as I would like it to be. What are some tips for converting, all these people with Udemy accounts? How can we have a few more people logging on every month while actually thinking, and how am I going to do it? I do actually have time in my calendar. I had time in my calendar. Every Friday, I had like several hours blocked off at the end of the day when I was going to do my professional development, make time for myself, and learn a huge bucket list of skills that I had. And it just wasn't happening. I had a lot going on, not the least of which being organizing a live event for hundreds of Concordians. I get to Friday and it just wasn't happening. So I asked Udemy, so how can we, while I'm asking this question, for a friend, it was very much for me. And they said, oh, have you heard about microlearning? And no, I hadn't heard about microlearning, not as such. So this is a nice, simple definition. There are longer and more technical definitions, but just a way of gaining knowledge that breaks information into small chunks, typically 5 to 10 minutes long. This is from Coursera. There's more academic definitions. This is not a particularly academic dive into microlearning. This is, like I said, this is from my point of view in a way that I hope is helpful. So learning designers are already using a lot of microlearning. The good news is, as I delve further into a little bit about what is microlearning, is that we're all doing it already. And this made me feel a lot better. This includes just-in-time learning, when you go and you have a problem and you Google how to fix it. When you're working on an Excel document and you search how to do a VLOOKUP properly because you can never remember. You're microlearning. Excellent. So the good news is we're all doing it, and we all have this nice checklist. We are doing more learning than we think, and I think giving yourself some credit for that and not thinking, oh, I didn't spend 2 hours sitting in front of the Udemy video I planned for. I think starting from a place of saying, hey, no, I am doing a lot. This is what I am learning. That's really helpful. However, while there's a lot of design, of educational design already happening for this, I think it helps to set the intention. What I wasn't doing was setting an intention for my microlearning. I was just kind of picking up the scraps of learning that I needed to get jobs done, to get tasks done. So being told that microlearning is officially a thing and that doing as little as 5 minutes a day can have a huge impact, I found this very, very liberating. So yeah, I think that is the #1 benefit, microlearning. 5 minutes a day, it doesn't sound like a lot. And when you're getting into your bad habits and going into your excuse AI in your head saying, no, I'm really busy, I really can't, no, I just need to take a break, no, I have to finish sending that email, you do have 5 minutes. And for me, it was a lot easier to tell myself, I can do this for just 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I don't have success every single day, but I actually, even while working on this event, I have success most days saying, I have 5 minutes to learn something new for myself, not just incidentally because I was solving a problem, but intentionally, I can do it. Effectiveness, there is data to show that information retention in very small but repetitive doses can actually be improved. Ease of access, like I said, YouTube is already set up like this. Many resources that we just find online are already set up like this. And especially today, I am trying to encourage people to check out Udemy. So you have access to a lot of micro-learning resources. It's not something special you need to go out of your way to find. And finally, motivation. Again, I thought it was a lot harder to talk myself out of doing something for 10 minutes than it is to talk myself out of having to do something for 2 hours on a Friday afternoon. The one main risk that came up is that there is a risk of complexity. If you're doing something very, very technical or with a big curve getting started, you may need to give it more than 5 to 10 minute chunks at some point. But I think the benefits kind of outweigh the risks, and try it. And if you get stuck, well, I think maybe you'll have enough of those 5 minute chunks to motivate yourself to do some bigger ones if needed. So getting back to doing micro-learning with Udemy. Udemy as a platform is already almost all micro-learning ready, but there is a special subset of courses which are also, in addition to being broken up into specifically very short 5-6 minute chunks. They're also very short. The total lengths of the courses are only a few hours, and this is a Smart Tips series made by Udemy. So I encourage you to try. This is just a screenshot of a few of those courses. I'm in a couple of them right now. I'm doing the project management and agile one, and it's not your PMP certification, but it is a nice, accessible place to start and to see if that maybe makes sense as a future step for me. Do I want to spend more time learning about deeper project management techniques? So that's a great place to start. And I think there's something nice for me personally. I'm finding these courses that are just built for micro-learning. Many courses are broken down into those little chunks, but these courses that are very intentionally short and sweet, bite-sized pieces for kind of doing a little bit every day, it's just been a very, very pleasant user experience, and it's geared to the pace that I want to learn at, which is in little bitty bites. However, almost all of Udemy is set up to be pretty close to micro-learning. You could micro-learn after that at any course at Udemy. I'd give another shout out to the library resources. We have the information toolkits, the quick things, and the AI quick start. That's actually linked to on the Skillshare website. So if you want to check those out, those are also really great places to start with micro-learning. Again, tons of resources for this. I think the key is to be intentional and pick something so that you're not just getting the little crumbs. Again, so these are not general research. This is what you must do. This is what's working for me with one added device. Schedule some time, but don't schedule 2 hours on a Friday afternoon. Schedule some time when you're still going to have energy. Schedule 5 minutes, maybe before you do something less fun, like clear out your inbox. Be intentional. That's, to me, made the real difference. What do you want? What is good for you, too? Sometimes I think I get caught up on a lot of shoulds. I should be doing this, but I seem to learn more effectively when this is what I want to be learning or need to be learning. Third tip, I actually haven't tried because I know it works for a lot of people. I wanted to include it. Udemy does have a mobile app. I think a lot of people don't realize that. Great way to make some extra time for yourself on your commute, and also maybe enable some of those pushy notifications if that works for you. I just know that if I go into phone land, I sometimes get stuck there. But it could be a really good option if you're really still resisting getting the learning you want to get done on a daily basis. And then give yourself permission. Obviously, give yourself permission to learn things. But again, for me, what I actually needed permission was to stop learning things. Sometimes I start a course and it's not what I want. I get halfway through it and I change direction, or I get halfway through and I'm like, okay, I got it. I got this. I don't need to see it from 30 different angles. I'm going to move on to the next thing. So you get permission to quit. You got it from me. Quit and start something new. And permission to fail. Like, yeah, I don't do my micro-learning every single day. Wake up the next day and I'm still on the train or the bus or whatever the metaphor we're using is, the rocket ship to the AI universe. You can start over. It's fine. And to give yourself credit for what you're already doing, because I know that everyone here is already doing a lot and already doing great. So that's it. That's my very short and sweet presentation on microlearning, and I hope it was useful, and I hope there's a few questions.
I think there was a question online. Is that true? I'll read it out. Okay, the question says, what kinds of things are you learning during those 5 minutes, and have you consolidated those learnings into everyday life?
Well, like I said, I have restarted a few times, so there's also that. I am also working on, this plays into Paul's presentation. I'm taking a micro-learning course also on how to be a great coach. A manager who's a great coach is one of the Udemy Smart Tips courses. I am quite enjoying it. I'm just kind of pacing it with like the degree to which I will get to apply it with my team and if we have more urgent needs. But those have actually, despite not thinking of necessarily being in a formal coaching situation, it has made me really reflect on what I can do for my team to kind of motivate them and support them and have them asking them questions and having them solve their own problems instead of just always loitering and then swooping in and being the manager who's like, let me fix it. They actually have the ability to solve most of their own problems, and they do great when I don't kind of take that opportunity away from them. So that's been great. And in my personal life too, I have to say I've been, I hope this answers the question. I've been having a lot better success doing a little bit of meditation with a meditation app by telling myself 10 minutes. 10 minutes is great. So that's, I can't quite articulate it, but it is adding up to something, and it is building up to feeling like, oh, I actually have a practice and I have formed a new habit. So that's really working for me. I hope that helps answer the question.
Thank you. There's a question back here also.
Thank you. This has been very informative, and I've learned a lot. My question regarding microlearning, have you found that sometimes the time is not enough for things to actually stick? Because sometimes when you're trying to learn something that might have maybe a more complex learning curve, or something that's trying to undo an ingrained habit, I find that sometimes I'll learn something in 5 minutes, or I'll learn something in 10 minutes, but if I'm like, it doesn't consolidate, and therefore it might not always stick, and if you found a way around that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's a really good point, and it definitely, complexity is one of the challenges. I don't have a magical solution for it, other than I know that they say that right when you're starting to forget things is the perfect moment to relearn them, and that's when your memory actually activates best. So instead of thinking, oh no, I didn't grasp it, I'm forgetting it, maybe the time when you're like, oh, I didn't quite get it, I thought I understood it yesterday, but I need a bit more time, maybe that's the perfect time to give it 5 more minutes and to see if doing that repeatedly can help build up to the total complexity you need. But yeah, sometimes it might not be enough, and you might have to find a little bit more time.
Yeah,
One thing I'll add, though, I'm a big user of the mobile app for Udemy, and there are two features that are really great about it. First of all, you can download the entire course to your phone. So if you have a long commute or a flight or something, you can preload your phone and do the entire course during that time. And second is you can turn off your screen and the audio will keep playing. So depending on the course, the nature of it, you actually turn it into a podcast you can listen to on your way in. You don't have to stare at the screen all the time. So it's, as far as apps go, it's one of the better ones that actually has some nice flexibility to it. So it's a good thing to bring up. Yeah, so I'm gonna go on to my presentation, which is the Protégé effect. So that's a fancy way of saying how you learn by teaching, right? And one of the reasons that I'm doing this is partly, I think that's one of the great things of this event, is it invites a bunch of people who don't normally spend time teaching others what they know to spend some time teaching what they know. And for me, this was really the beginning of a different way of approaching a bunch of things. So I really want to focus on the benefits that come from learning by teaching. I have 3 studies I'm going to cite for. They're at the end of the presentation. I'm sure we'll make those available afterwards. But the 5 benefits are deeper understanding, improved retention, enhanced metacognitive awareness. So for people who don't know, metacognitive awareness is being aware of the extent of your knowledge, how you know what you know, and knowing the limits of what you know. And then there's better knowledge transfer, and then increased motivation. So we're just going to go through a couple of studies and illustrate how learning by teaching really gets you these benefits. So in the first one, deeper understanding. So the premise is teaching helps you organize and explain concepts, leading to a more profound comprehension of the materials. So in this study, researchers wanted to see if teaching improves learning. So they divided the students into 3 groups. The control group was study, take a test right away. So your usual kind of scenario. The preparation group was prepare to teach, but you're not actually going to teach and then get tested right away. And then the third group was prepare to teach, and then we're going to test you right away. So the results of that were that the study-only group had an average of 62. And then the prepare to teach did 10 to 15% better. So that's not even teaching, that's just how your mind works differently when you think you're going to have to explain something to somebody else. The benefits on like understanding right away. And then those people who actually applied and who actually went and taught other people did actually 20% better than the ones who taught only. So that gives you right away an appreciation for how much better you understand the material you're working with when you're expecting to teach it and when you actually get to teach it to other people. In the same study for improved retention, what they did is they then went and asked those same people a week later, tested them again on the same subject matter that they were. And so the study group had a 50% score. The prepare to teach got 56 score, which is 12% better long-term retention. And then those who taught had a 73, which is 46% better than those who just studied only. So we could see here the impacts that when you're teaching other people, you're actually cementing a lot of that knowledge over a longer term. So your retention is improved from that. Enhanced metacognitive awareness. So here is what they did in this study is metacognitive awareness is explaining to yourself and others, raises your awareness of your knowledge gaps, improving your ability to self-contain effectively. So the researchers in this study asked students to verbalize their thoughts out loud while studying to determine the difference between good and bad learners. And the premise here is that when you're verbalizing, you're kind of teaching. So you're saying out loud what you know. It's a form of, there's a nice correlation with teaching here. And the results here were that good learners, those who did well, used explanations that reflect a deeper understanding. So it wasn't just about what was in front of them. It was asking themselves question, why is this like this? Why does this work like this? And so on. And so they found that they were able to pick up 3 extra concepts as they were verbalizing their own learning at the same time. And the ones who tended to do less well just tended to restate the problem or just repeat the steps in front of them. So this is the idea that if you're teaching somebody and you're explaining the concepts and so on, that just gives you a better, as you're preparing to teach, you're actually you're more aware of your own understanding, and verbalizing it helps you cover that gap. And so you cover better awareness for that. And then finally, not finally, but on the same study, what they did as well is that they then asked people to solve problems that were identical to the one that they had verbalized to themselves. And so the score for the good learners was 96, and for the poor learners was 62. But what was even more interesting is on the knowledge transfer side is that similar problems, so not identical problems, but problems related that needed to leverage the same concepts to solve them. Those who were better at explaining the metacognitive awareness were better at solving similar problems than the poorer learners at that point. So a comparison of 68 to 30. So that really, it's a knowledge transfer ability you get out of it. So you're more able to apply those concepts to different things at that point. So that was an interesting finding as well. Increased motivation, finally. So increased motivation, having the responsibility of teaching encourages deeper engagement and a greater sense of purpose. I mean, there's some pressure, right? If you're going to be in front of people and you're going to try to communicate and to transfer this knowledge to them, there's a little more pressure. But what was interesting is researchers wanted to know whether learning with the expectation of teaching leads to not only higher interest, but also enjoyment and a willingness to engage further, as well as better conceptual understanding of the material. So the results for that were that there was 60% more interest for people who were preparing to teach than those who just were studying to take a test. And in the same way, the 50% more enjoyment for people who were actually expecting to teach the material, and 175% more willingness to participate further, right? So this is all related to the fact that when you're in a situation when you want to teach somebody what you know, and you want to take the knowledge that you're taking in, you're just much more likely to cover all the angles, and you benefit from all these things at the same time. Now, how to integrate, and this is part of what I've been trying to do lately more and more, and it's really permeated a lot of how I work every day. One of the things is when I approach a colleague, I'm really coming at it from the expectation of providing an explanation, teaching the person why I'm doing the things I do. So my everyday job is change management and so on. And so I don't just tell people, these are the change management activities. Part of it is, here's what you should do, and here's the reasons behind it. So I'm always using those opportunities of working with colleagues as an opportunity to teach them about why we're approaching things a certain way. And I think that's another thing that helps you get mastery over your own subject matter expertise at the same time. And then there's benefits because they get to learn from it at the same time. In the same way, when I'm working with somebody who knows volumes about things I don't know about, I really try to encourage them to teach me what they know at that point. And that can be really helpful. So if I'm working with somebody from the Office of Research and a thing works, you know, there's 5 types of grants and these are the ways they work, I really ask a lot of questions and I invite them to teach me about this, because ultimately it makes it better for the project, but it also creates this kind of expectation that people are coming at it from, you know, we're here to do a project, but we're also here to share our knowledge together and to teach each other how these things work. The other thing is, some of you might know, I'm a big user of Viva Engage, and there's a couple of communities there. Last year, I challenged myself to write a post every week or 2 on the subject. And so I would take some of my personal development time, but so there are things I kind of knew about, but the fact that I wanted to write an article about them or a short how-to instructional really forced me to actually go back, and I discovered I actually didn't know that as well as I thought I did. Not in a way where I wanted to put myself out there as writing something as authoritative, not authoritative, but just as somebody who knows this stuff. And so it just made me have a more in-depth understanding, validate my own knowledge about certain things, and put that out there. So, you know, challenging yourself to share that either Viva Engage or in a group or anything, those are really great ways to kind of form a habit around learning by teaching. And finally, last but not least, host a digital skills share day session next year. I think that's a nice challenge, because those even for this and my talk later, these are 2 subjects that I actually spent some hours making sure I do what I was talking about before I came in front of people to talk about them. So even if you're an expert, it's good to put yourself in front of people and actually really connect with what you know and cover some gaps. And that's it. That's my short presentation. There's some citations. Well, if people are curious about the studies, they're there. Happy to take questions.
Do we have any questions online? No questions in here? Oh, there we go. As well, Olivier.
Oh, no, not Olivier.
I always have the best questions. Hi, Paul. Thanks for the talk. What was the most interesting you learned by preparing this session?
I think just really reading the 3 studies more in depth and understanding really. So there were the study results, but really focusing more on the methodology, what questions, the research questions they were asking, and so there's something to reading a paper more in depth, and that's one of the things that I find is the more academic papers you read, the easier it is to pull information out of them and to know where to look for stuff, and that's something I would say in the last year I've been I've had the opportunity to read more papers. And so I think those are really, you know, it's kind of fascinating. The language gets in the way sometimes, and academic language can be a little intimidating, but I would have to say that that's also one of the benefits of ChatGPT. And like we were talking earlier about that session is I upload the paper, I try to read it myself, and then I have a conversation with ChatGPT to make sure I've understood things. And if there's things that aren't clear, I say, you know, I'm confused about this. I think it means this. Can you tell me if I'm off on this? And, you know, I have to say that that's been a really wonderful tool in terms of figuring out those things. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Are there any on?
Maybe I'll just make a comment.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, unless there's someone with a question.
We do have a question.
I'll just make a very quick comment. Just observing both of your conversations, I was seeing an opportunity for someone to take one of your Udemy micro smart tips courses and just pair off with someone in their team or a colleague and just learn together and recite it back to the other person. I think that's one takeaway from listening to both yours.
Hi, Paul. I was interested to know how you pick the things you want to learn about. You seem very intentional about your process, and I'm curious how you decide what you want to learn.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that are I mean, personal interests. My earlier post was really around MS Teams and using, you know, that Office suite, and I thought there were definitely some things that would be of benefit for people to know. So part of it is, I think this is something that will be useful for other people is a huge part of the motivation. And then I think increasingly, just because I manage a community on Viva Engage called AI for Workplace Practices, and you know, community spaces online don't manage themselves. Like you really need to create a lot of engagement. So for me, trying to get those communities to work really forced me to say, like, I need to produce some content here. I need to produce some engagement. So I was really looking at things that I could bring back to the community, make useful for other people, and so on. So I think it's always with the mind of sharing with other people and thinking about colleagues. And ultimately, you know, wouldn't it be great if more people at Concordia knew this type of stuff? So for me, that's a huge motivator. It's actually, it's part of the reason why I was involved in Digital Skillshare at the beginning. I think there's incredible potential. It's fun. I could do this all day long. So maybe I'm just lucky because this is something that makes me happy and gets me out of bed in the morning. Yeah.
So we're at time. So I thank you very much. These were very interesting talks. If ever you have additional questions, do not hesitate to reach out to any of our three fabulous presenters. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, we're going to take a bit of a pause now. Those of you joining us on Zoom, just stick around. We'll be back in a few minutes. Here. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the last lightning round of today's, what's the first day of Digital Skillshare Days. Did I say it's the last day? It's not the last day. This is the first day. We're just getting going, everyone. Oh my goodness. Okay, this lightning round is Friendly Futures, and the moderator today is also the manager of digital capabilities at the library, Jasia Stuart. Over to you.
Thanks, Douglas. Small correction, we are actually doing the tips and tricks lightning round. The next one will be Friendly Futures with Paul Fournier. But it is...
So just forget everything I just said, and we'll just keep going.
No problem, no problem. I mean, so I think it is the late afternoon energy. We're all, hopefully, maybe we had too many cookies and we're in our sugar crash because the snacks have been great. I don't have too much to say because I think tips and tricks is kind of self-explanatory. This session was something I pushed for that I was really excited about because that's secretly what I want at every conference I go to. Like, yes, give me the big ideas and the theory and make me look smart, but if you could just give me some secret pointers to make my day-to-day life easier and to make things smoother and to make me look really good, well, that'd be fabulous. And we have around the table Ping, Megan, Paul, John, who are all individuals I've worked with for several years at Concordia and who are all amazing and they're all enthusiastic users of technology, but I think all their approaches are different and unique. And so I think there'll be a little something here for everyone, no matter what your kind of take on things is and no matter what your needs are. I hope you'll find one of these sessions or these micro lightning rounds really useful. So without further chit chat, I'm going to turn it over to Ping.
Hello? All right. Hello, everybody. So I'm actually going to talk about PowerPoint. You're going to get a little bit more context once I get into the content, but first I'll just let a short video to introduce the topic.
am the lines animation tool in PowerPoint. I am your best friend. I can help you make things glide across the slide really easily. Let me share with you a PowerPoint slide on how I can help. You grab the thing you want to animate, give it a line animation, then you drag it around the slide to where you want it to go. You just have to make sure that the position is right, that timing is right, that you remove the smoothing effect, that you...
Hey there, can I join you folks? I can help you make things glide across the slide too. Nice to meet you all. I'm the morph tool in PowerPoint.
I think I gotta go with the next lighting round. See ya!
All right, so I don't know if many of you have struggled in the past of using the line animation tool on PowerPoint where you're trying to move things around and you can just never get it right because it keeps snapping to where it's not supposed to. Maybe the timing is off. You plan to do it 3 seconds, but then it's taking 5 seconds. Anyways, I've had my struggles, and if I can echo to Anik's keynote speech earlier, I'm team PowerPoint all the way, and I think it's all about using the tools to its maximum efficiency. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the morph tool in PowerPoint. And it's basically a slide transition option that you have in PowerPoint. And it allows you to basically move things really quickly across the slide or through multiple slides. So the idea is really just to set the object at the starting point on one slide, move it to the destination point on the next slide, and it basically does all the tweening stuff automatically. So the idea here is I did not manually, move these things around. It's literally just one slide is having the two things on having the text on the left side and then the image on the right. The next slide, I just swap them. And by applying the morph transition function, it basically does all of this automatically. So again, I'm just pushing images around. I'm not using any of the line animation tool. It's all done automatically once you apply the morph transition. And it includes, rotation stuff. I'm not saying that these are good things. I'm just saying that you can do them. So so you're just basically playing around like this by moving through these different slides. So what can it do for you practically in a serious presentation, let's say? So for example, you might have a really large graphic that you want to go over during a presentation. So what you can do is load the graphic on the first slide and basically use the morph transition to start focusing on different elements of your slide. So now I'm in Europe, now you're going to Montreal. The image quality was not very good, but I think you get the idea. You can do unzooms as well. So this, instead of basically moving the slide, you're just playing with the size of the slide, and it automatically does these zooming functions. Alternatively, really cool feature is implementing 3D models directly from PowerPoint. So you can also do these funky little animations when you're playing with 3D models. Maybe not National Geographic level animations, but it still kind of communicates the idea, right? So, you can pop in the little things like this and just entirely just using the morph transitions to create these animations. And the fun part is, you can also use these different types of graphics, like a timeline, maybe. You're doing a timeline presentation, you can just keep moving one line, one after the other, etc. Play around, do little crazy, transition like this. Let's see if it does it. There you go. So basically, that's the idea, right? You're just moving things around. It makes it much faster instead of trying to manually try to move your things in the right place, etc. And the coolest thing is you can actually export all of these things into a video. And that's exactly what you saw at the beginning of the presentation. It's a little clip. You prepare all the animations ahead of time, export them into video, and then play around with it. So that's really it. A quick overview of this tool that you can use in PowerPoint. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions if there's any.
Oh, there's one up front.
Ping, this is my absolute favorite thing to see. Thank you for putting some light on it. I wondered if actually Having used this and having it save my life in a number of situations for morph, as opposed to line animations, can you talk just a quick bit more about the fact that you have to duplicate the slide? Because I've gotten to the point before where I've made a slide and then I've made another slide and I've kind of created the same object, but then the morph doesn't work because I didn't duplicate. Can you talk a little bit more about that part, if we could?
Yeah, so no technology is perfect. So in this particular case, while it does save you time in animation, it does increase slightly your load of managing the slides. Essentially, the way that PowerPoint recognizes which element to transition and morph is actually through the naming of the object. So if you go into your selection pane in PowerPoint, not to get too technical here, but if you get into the selection pane, you usually see the whole list of your objects on the slide. And usually they will have default name like rectangle 4, rectangle 5, rectangle 6. And the way that PowerPoint recognizes which element is moving from slide to slide is actually through these names. So sometimes it might just be that, it's when you duplicate the slide, it's recognizing something else as the object, and then it creates this really weird animations. So it does create a little bit more complexity in that side, but I'll rather take my chances with the slide number than to play with the line animator. So.
Oh, we have a question at the table.
It's just more of a comment. Thanks very much, Ping, for that. It's very interesting that it allows for accessible creativity as well, because it's rudimentary, but it also produces some really interesting learning objects. So instructors can create content and not have to worry too much about the production process. So that's what I really like about what you showed. You did it very, very quickly, and it's very, very accessible. So it's I really appreciate that.
If there's no other questions in the room, I actually have a quick question too. So this follows up. Yeah, I know I can't have two mics. To follow up on what John is saying, Ping, maybe do you have an example of a time when someone wanted you to do something they thought was really complicated and was maybe asking you to use a more complex technological solution? Like, what's the craziest time you're like, no, I'm going to just do it with PowerPoint?
Every day. I think that's what Juliette is telling me to say, every day. I think one of the use cases that's really helpful is actually when you're trying to do some prototypes, for example, and you're just trying to communicate an idea to, for example, a faculty member. You're trying to tell them, for example, oh, we can maybe do some 3D kind of animations. And sometimes the faculty member might not understand exactly what you're talking about. So slapping a prototype together really quickly in PowerPoint can help. And to John's point, you can also upload your own 3D models into PowerPoint. So the ones that I used were just like stock image of the sun and the earth. But in some cases, faculty members might have a very specific request. They're like, oh, I have a 3D scan in my brain. Can I do some kind of animations with this kind of thing? So this is something that we've actually done before, where it's a really quick and easy way to create something that, first of all, communicates to the faculty member what we're trying to do. And secondly, something that is actually, where the quality is actually acceptable, especially if we're using the right assets, and integrating them directly into either a presentation or in the course and the lessons. If they want to do something else, like a short video of something, it also gives them a chance to play around with this. So.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ping.
I'll just wait for my slides. Okay, there they are. All right, so my name is Megan, and this might be a little bit of a boring topic, but Jasia said it was okay. I'd like to take you on a very small journey into how I manage my to-do lists, and to share a few tips if you're in the market for task managers. So I have a terrible memory, and if I'm being honest, a certain amount of anxiety. So I love to write things down. And I also love to collect ideas, whether they're my own or more often my wonderful colleagues' ideas, so that they're not lost. So managing tasks and things to do and ideas to hold on to for the future is a perennial challenge for me, let's say. And so this is a picture of my desk. There's lots of sticky notes. There's lots of little bits of paper. I always seem to end up with the paper and with the sticky notes. I'm never entirely rid of them, but I also have some software tips and tricks that help keep me sane. So today I'm going to show you 4 tools to recommend. Some I'm currently using and some I've used in the past. So the first one, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. I think it's pronounced Iowa or Iowa. I fell in love with it when it was called Drop Task many years ago, mainly because it has a lot of features for visualizing tasks in different views, and it also has mind mapping and whiteboard features. I have a little screenshot of those. It's a freemium product, so it's limited in what you can do with the free version. But I'll flip back to the previous slide. It has some views that I really like that can show you tasks by urgency. So in the screenshot that I have on the slide, you can see some boards of tasks that show normal, urgent, and very urgent tasks. So I find that very useful. But for a variety of reasons that are too long to explain in this very short presentation, with great regret, I decided to stop paying for this tool. And I exported all of my tasks and my whiteboards, and the tasks I could actually export to a spreadsheet that I was able to import to my current main tool, which I'll show in a moment. But that's a tip I want to point out, is that if you're using a task manager like I do to store ideas, it's important to be able to export them to other tools if you need to at some point. So what I'm currently using mainly is Microsoft To Do. So an advantage to that, many of you may be using it, is that it integrates with Outlook. So you can view flagged emails as well as tasks that are assigned from Teams. A key tip that I have found here is using it to set up lists. So again, I want to have that feature of things that are like urgent or ongoing or to check on. So those are some labels that I use so that I can see the relative importance of tasks. And I would be completely lost without being able to set up due dates and reminders. So those are really useful things to use in To Do. And I just want to point out that the screenshot does look a little bit weird because I've redacted it. I use sort of labels with names of people, so people I meet with often. I set up the things that I need to check in with them on, or again, idea files. So I didn't want people to see this slide and see their names and feel weird. So that's why it's like blurred out a little bit. And then also recurring reminders are a really key feature here. My secondary tool related to tasks is Evernote, which again is a freemium tool. And I do pay for this because I use it for note-taking and many other really useful features. But in terms of tasks, when I'm taking notes, it has a feature to assign tasks related to the note itself. So how I use this is when I have tasks that I need to refer back to within the context of the note. So that's often action items or things I need to refer back to the next time I'm referring to that note. So again, I have files related to either meetings or people, and so then I can see the tasks the next time I refer to that note. It also has task views, so I use this less often, but it is very useful. I can see all of the tasks that have been assigned across lots of different notes. It does have different like collaboration features and so on too that are outside the scope here. And then finally, I also use Google Tasks. I use this in my personal life because I'm maybe in the minority of people who use an Android phone for my personal life. And so I keep it completely separate from all of my work stuff. And I can set up reminders for recurring things or things I need to do either routinely, like every day, or far in the future. So I have a reminder of when my son's passport expires, for example. That's showing on the screenshot, so that's going to give a reminder in 5 years when I need to take care of that. So that's also very useful to me. So just to conclude, I think my main advice in sort of this journey of trying out different tools is to find something and stick with it, and really take the time to set up those recurring reminders and have a system where you can see your priorities and the relative urgency of tasks, and separate out different parts of your life. And then the last one about being able to easily find a tool that you can transfer from one system to another when you need to make a change. So I think that's it, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Any questions here? Here's one.
Thanks for sharing, Megan. I'm a big nerd when it comes to like to-do lists, getting organized. So I really enjoyed this. I'd like to know, do you have a process around how you get the to-do list together, how you call the list and get the things that are done out on a regular basis? And what's your process for defining what your priorities are?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I use the due dates a lot, and I'd be really lost without that. So that's a key thing that I use in the Microsoft tasks. So definitely the due dates. I think it also then comes down to just I use those, I think in the screenshot I showed like the urgent tasks for today. So there again, this comes into like different productivity methods. So I fail almost every day, but I really try to pick like what are the priorities for today. Like there's some methods that call it like your hit list for today. So I try to do that. But then it also just comes down to like things that I have like blocked time for. In the calendar. So that is one. I don't like the Microsoft tool in the same way that I liked others, but I like the way that it integrates with like the calendar and with Teams and so on when you've been flagged a task in a team and so on. So that helps like naturally have priorities assigned with due dates and things like that. Thanks for the question, Debbie.
We just had a comment here, I think, on Zoom, which I'll read, from Javier, who says, "Thanks, Megan. I also love Microsoft To Do and Outlook integration and lose my mind without it." Sharing an extra tip that worked for Javier, I also discovered that I can easily add MS Teams chat messages to my to-do planner. Oh yeah, that is good.
Yep, and I think I mentioned too that flagged emails can also go into the view, so that really helps.
Any other comments, questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Megan.
Thanks. My name is Paul. Thanks everyone for being here. I've learned some good stuff so far. And like Jasia, when I go to a conference and I see a keynote speaker or something like that, I'm thinking to myself, like, how did he prepare? How did he get to where he is now? Not so much the content of what he's doing on stage, but like, what kind of coffee maker does he have? What's his workflow when he wakes up in the morning? That kind of thing. So really, when we're talking about tips and tricks, we're talking about, optimizing our time or taking control of our time. And that's something that's really important to me. We are in control of so very little in our day. So the more that we can do, the better. So I'm going to take, in this digital skill shares session, I'm going to give you 2, maybe 3 analog tips first. So the way that I start my day, I always start, as Jasia does with her learning, she starts with an intention for learning. I start my day with an intention. Today's intention was about patience. So I repeat that to myself throughout my day. The second thing, very important, I always make my bed. So making your bed is probably the last thing you do that you're in control of, right? When you leave the house, you have no control of the traffic, the public transportation, what your boss is gonna throw at you, but at least you know that you made your bed in the morning, so you can rely on that. Okay, so let's get into some of the more digital things. So what I do is that I don't want to get lost into what I have to do next. So I'm always asking myself, what's the next actionable step I can take? So for me, to-do lists are very important. But what I do is I sit down, I always have coffee, usually in this mug, and then I open Outlook and Teams. From Outlook, and I'll talk about this in my presentation tomorrow, is how to create these to-do lists from your email. So email for me, I always try to do inbox 0, meaning that the email that I have there, it's got to leave. It's got to go somewhere. Either it's going into a to-do list where I can action on it, or it's going into a folder where I can address it later. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But so try to get to inbox 0. One of the big things that I use for that is the Microsoft rules in Outlook, and I'll talk about that in my presentation tomorrow as well. The using rules should automate everything. So everything from my boss goes into a boss folder, everything from, it's all categorized. And I go a little crazy. I must have about 30 rules in Outlook right now that manages everyone. Because when somebody comes back and says, I'm scared to go on vacation, I'm going to come back to 2,000 emails, and to me that doesn't say to me that you're a very busy person. It just says that you're not very organized the way that you're managing your email. So when you come back from vacation, you can even have a vacation rule that says, okay, well, I want to have everything in the subject title everything in the body of the message that says, "Hi, Paul," I want that to go into, because I know it's addressed to me. Everything that's CC is going to go into another folder automatically. So these things are all kind of triaged for me. So that's what I use my inbox for. I triage my messages, and everything goes into a nice folder that way. The other thing that I try to do is managing notifications. I leave them on, but I leave them on only for my favorite people. It's favorite not because they're my favorite people, just because that's what they call it in Outlook, right? You can go into your people section of Outlook, and you can favorite certain people, which is great because then you can turn on notifications just for those people. So I have about 5-6 people that I get notifications from. You can do that on your phone as well. So in the Outlook app, you can say, only show me notifications for my favorite people. The other thing that I've done, I'm going to move away from Outlook a little bit, is on your mobile phone, I use something called focus modes. I don't know if Android has it, but iPhone definitely has it. So whenever I come to work, it automatically goes into a work focus mode. So the apps on my screen change so that you'll be hard pressed to find any social media. You have to go looking for it or either search for it or something like that. You'll see about 5 apps on my phone right now if you look at it. Notifications are silenced whenever a meeting happens. There's things like that that really I find is very helpful. And it keeps things separate. So when I go home, I also have a home focus, and anything in between, it's fair game. There's games, there's all the stuff. And then lastly, I don't want to take up too much time. Using Microsoft Edge and Copilot has really been a game changer for me. I've always been, pushing Microsoft Edge to the side using Chrome and Firefox, but this integration and the licenses that the university has with Microsoft product has really kind of taken it another step forward, because any PDF, any summarization of a page, anything that you want to do, your Edge is logged into your Microsoft ID, so it also expedites logging into any of the services that we have, the single sign-on, and also it allows you to summarize PDFs. So whatever you have on the page, you have a little sidebar that says, you could just say, you summarize this web page for me, and it'll give you the top 3 points if you want. So those are some very, very key things for me. The last 2 things I'll talk about. One, I guess this is somewhat digital, but a little analog. A gear bag. Have a gear bag with 3 things in it. A USB-C cable, a battery pack, and an HDMI adapter. You have no idea how many times I've been to a party and somebody either doesn't have their HDMI cable and wants to do karaoke, but I'm always there. The other thing is, let's see. Okay, the last thing I'll talk about is what I do for micro-learning, because this kind of made me think about how I create lists for podcasts. I have a morning list, a tech list, a lifestyle, and a history list. And it automatically downloads, and depending on what I want to listen to at that time, morning, first thing I do, it has all my podcasts, CBC World Report, all that kind of stuff. If anyone wants to talk about podcasts, I'll be here. And I think I'll end it there. Please come tomorrow morning if you guys want to learn more. I have more of a presentation and a little more in-depth on how to use these things. So thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for Paul? Okay. Great.
This is my jam. That's why I have so many questions. Sorry.
No problem.
So how did you come up with your rules? Because they seem very evolved over time. Like, what was your process to come to this place of what seems to be like sophistication with your system?
Yeah, it's really, I think what I did was, it was just getting a little overwhelming, seeing all these emails and the clutter and everything. So I sat down, I unsubscribed to a bunch of promotional things. The newsletters, I only kept the ones that I wanted. And that was another thing I didn't mention is the newsletters. I have something called Readwise Reader. All the newsletters get forwarded to there, so I can read them separately in a separate app. But for the rules, it was more. So for instance, I get so many approvals that I have to do in SAP. So I found the email addresses that are used, and I created a rule. So now I see a ticker on the side. It says, okay, you have 16 things to approve. I mark them all as red when I'm done with them. So it's just kind of like, it's really taking, I would set aside 30 minutes, sit down with your inbox, get to know it, look at the clutter, and really come up with hey, this should be in a folder, this should be, and what can I do to make this inbox like empty, completely empty, so that at the end of the day, it's gone. Even if you're receiving new messages or emails, they're going to the right spot. It just makes your life, your mind so much less cluttered, I should say. So it's not rocket science, and they're really like, you have the option of saying, move this message, copy this message, forward this message. So you have all these different these options. I move everything because I don't want duplicates, but I would say just block off 30 minutes and spend some time with your email and put it back in order. Uh-oh.
Hey, Paul. I'm just curious, actually, because one of the things that I've noticed is as I've been using Teams a lot, my email traffic has gone down considerably. And I know that comes at a cost because Teams is a little more more notifications and so on, but I'm just kind of curious about your experience. Do you see like working more in Teams as something that like helps you towards an inbox zero? Is it more of a distraction? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's good, and I've been using more the statuses of Teams, and I find that when I put myself as busy, I don't get as much messages. I find people are, it's almost like an etiquette now that you can still message someone, it'll still go through, it'll still notify them, but I think there's a little bit of an etiquette there. I've also set up groups in Teams where it's at the top, where you have your kind of but yeah, the notifications is a thing. I haven't really kind of figured it out. I wish they had more of a granular way to manage notifications in Teams than they do, but it's true that it does have a bit of a, like now you're managing two systems, right? You're talking on Teams, you're talking on email, so I haven't really figured that out yet, actually, but I'm open to suggestions.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Paul, thank you.
Thanks.
So these are really, really helpful. I'm taking note of these. This is great. So tips and tricks. So I've got a tip to share. But I hope it's not something that everyone's already well familiar with, and so I'm telling you a tip that you all know already. But I'm probably in the next chart. I'm probably somewhere in the middle towards the far right, going not exactly the laggard, but somewhere in that, definitely past the midpoint. So one of the challenges I've always had, and ironically, I used to be a newspaper writer. I used to have to write a number of stories in a week and whatnot, is note-taking and going into meetings and sitting there. And I'm always fascinated by colleagues who can sit there and type on their keyboard while they're having a conversation with me. They're just typing away, and I'm just like, it's like this superpower. I'm like, how do they do that? Like, I wish I could do that. So I don't have that superpower. So what I do is I write my notes, and I know that they're barely legible because I'm trying to write everything down as quickly as possible and trying to capture everything. So what I found has been helpful over time is, and I have notebooks that are like all kind of, I just grab notebooks off the shelf in no particular order. So I have notebooks that are quarter filled and half filled, which is probably not very, there's a productivity issue there and sustainability issue as well, but I try and keep it down to 3 or 4 notebooks that I grab. But I found that what has been really helpful is to use the voice to text on my phone. So now we all have workflows. We call them workflows. It's just a habit, a work habit. So I've developed this work habit where I have all my notes, and I want to share them with the people who attended the meeting and making sure it makes sense. But sitting there and keying in my notes, it just takes me forever. So what I started doing a couple of years ago was just going into Microsoft Outlook. I launch Outlook, I start an email, and I started looking up on how do I do this? There's got to be a way to do voice to text. And so Microsoft just, of course, they're rolling out, more and more tools. It was great, it appeared. The microphone appeared, and I started experimenting. Click the little microphone, speak into my phone, into the email, and I just read my notes. And my notes start, and if I have to stop to collect my thoughts and my notes, I pause the recording, look at my notes, try and decipher them, say, okay, now I know what I'm going to, and I carry on reading into the email. And I started to try to, I thought, okay, great, I've got all my notes into the email, and now I just need to kind of work it and massage it. So I started to try massaging it on the phone, and it's not great. So what I do is I just leave it in my drafts, and then when I come to work or when I'm in front of the computer, I take the message, pull it up, and massage it into something that makes sense, and then I can just send it. And I found that it's just amazing how the workflow is improved with that kind of small little intervention, that little kind of habit of practice. And I tried experimenting in teams, interviewing faculty and talking about their teaching, and I was using in Microsoft Teams the transcription tool, which was great. So I spend, because I tend to be very verbose, and I'm in meetings with faculty maybe for half an hour, 45 minutes, and then I have this transcription. It's just like, oh no, like it's just runs on and on and on, and it's great, but it's problematic in the sense that now I have to get into the effort of reading through it and pulling out what's relevant, what's not relevant, and it's work in and of itself trying to like take that transcription and compressing it. So I find I've kind of reverted back to just note-taking. Even if it's scribbles, I know I can read my own sort of shorthand or my scribbles, and then I can just sort of do the voice to text, and that's worked for me. That's a technique that's worked for me. And unless I'm doing a really in-depth piece, something I really I need to capture all the nuances of the conversation with someone, then I will use the transcription. I'll go through it, and it's really full and rich. But that's my tip, and I don't know if I'm, that's something I found very helpful. Thank you.
Do we have Any questions?
I guess I'll ask a question then. Just I'm all mic'd up. So how do you decide on the level? You still have to make a decision about the level of granularity in your note taking. Like, how do you, or does it help because there's like the extra steps of like you're listening, you're writing, and then you're speaking? Does that help? Like, how do you decide how much to try and write down versus how much to leave out?
Well, I've got a bad habit of trying to write everything down, and I think that's the art. Is like when you're in a meeting and you're listening, actively listening to what everyone's saying, and you want to capture. It's being really discerning. It's trying to make that determination that that's essential and that's not essential. I won't write that down. But I do have a tendency to try and write everything down because I'm so worried about missing something. And so I'm still working on that, just capturing the essentials in my note taking. And then when I do, the work comes when it's in the draft format, when I do the voice to text and it's in the draft format, then I can really, when I see it in front of me, I can really work on it and get it down to, now seeing today with all the AI tools, this is all, I mean, in the future, I guess we'll have to see with iterations of Microsoft Teams and the Microsoft suites, things that are coming out. Where will this be? Where will these habits that I've developed, where will they change? But it's still something I work on, is trying to capture the essence of those meetings.
That's really interesting. I mean, I have questions about that often, and this has come up in some discussions in the in Paul's online AI community as well, is this kind of idea of like, oh, we're going to maximize productivity and we're going to minimize downtime. But I think people kind of, not always, and I love some of the tips, Paul, you've given us for today, because classifying, dealing with my messy inbox is not the work that adds value to my life. But the work you're describing of like writing and editing and kind of sorting through, if an AI did that for you, I believe there is some kinds of work that we don't ascribe value to, that we're like, oh, we could leave that out, but I think has value. For example, in my life, I think sometimes like massaging a little thing in an Excel file is actually when I like look at the data and I get familiar with it. So for some small things like the service I'm running in the sandbox, when I'm having those little data arguments trying to make the numbers come out into a visualization that makes sense to me, or just add up properly or figure out how much we're spending, that's actually also time when I'm kind of reflecting on what we're doing, how much money we spent. So I think it's interesting to be intentional about what tasks we want to automate and what tasks we want to get rid of and streamline and free up more time, and what tasks are also a moment for thinking and iterating.
Yeah, I agree. It's when I write an email, I'm really intentional, and often, very often the emails, not always, but often there's big components of strategic planning and strategic thinking, whether we're dealing with a piece of software, or trying to support a faculty member with an approach or something, a policy within the university, or that type of thing. So when I write those emails, I'm trying to be really, really deliberate about every little detail, every nuance, and then I'm always really aware of the fact that it's become a very long email. So I have to go through it again, because people don't have time to read long emails. So that's a piece of work in and of itself, is trying to be concise, but not be terse, and not to kind of cut things out. So it is a challenge. I'll be interesting to see with AI how that future unfolds, and trying to find how AI deals with that level of kind of nuance and minutia.
Thank you, John. It's really interesting.
We just had a comment from Zoom, John, just about, is there a name, the transcription tool in Teams? How would someone find that, or what it's called?
In Teams, it's automatic. When in Microsoft Teams, when you start recording, as long as you have the setting on, it'll tell you at the beginning that it's recording the video and the audio, and it's creating a transcription at the same time. And we also have UJA at Concordia. That's our lecture capture platform, and that also has that capacity, that capability as well. Yeah.
We just have a comment answering that too, also thank you, Josephine. Okay. Do we have any other questions here in space? We're all right. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, well, that wraps up our third lightning round, late afternoon energy, and we'll have another quick break and some snack time if people want it, and then we'll be back at 4 p.m.
Thanks, Jasia. That's right. There's one more. There's one more lightning round. Stick around.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thank you for joining us for Digital Skillshare Days 2025, Day 1. We are now entering our fourth and our final lightning round, Friendly Futures. We're not going to keep you too long here, so we're going to go ahead, just hand it right on over to your moderator for the day, Paul Fournier. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody, and thank you for everybody who's here, the people who stick to the end of the day. We appreciate you guys being here, both in person and online. Our segment, our lightning round right now is called Friendly Futures. I'm going to read you a quick description that was on the event website. In a world where the future often feels uncertain, it's time to shift the narrative. This lightning round features presenters who envision the future as a place of possibility, collaboration, and optimism. Join us to explore the fresh perspectives and find hope in tomorrow's opportunities. So I think this is a great way to end the day with a little bit of optimism and looking forward to things. Today I'm joined by two of my colleagues here. I have Alice Isac, who has been here with us at Concordia for 6 years, has a master's in educational technology, and is a lead experiential learning. And my good friend here, Olivier, who has been at Concordia for over 2 decades. He doesn't look it, but over 2 decades. Has a Doctor of Law and is a senior librarian at the library. So we're going to take our turns to talk about some topics, friendly futures, things we're optimistic about. And I'm going to invite Olivier to get us started.
Well, thanks so much, Paul. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks for having me. And to talk about friendly futures, I thought I'd start with some first times. When was the first time that you accessed a Wikipedia page? Or even better, when you updated one? Or when was the first time that you set up your Facebook account? Remember that moment, that day when you decided it was okay to be on Facebook? Not like checking it every day today, but like the first time. Or like reading an ebook, the first time. There was a moment, there was a time when you didn't read ebooks, and then there's a time where you did, right? So all those first times kind of seemed normal in a weird way. They didn't seem like it was a transformative moment in your life. It seemed like something from before is just a little different in the digital. So all those first times kind of felt like an increment, like a marginal change. But I have to tell you about the first time I used ChatGPT. I knew that first time was different. It was just not something I knew about, not something I understood. I could not relate to this machine system in any other way but through human mechanisms. And that felt weird. And that felt awful. And so, of course I had to research this. Of course I had to take a deep dive. And I had to understand, am I going to be replaced? And this is channeling a thought that I don't know if you've had, but I had this thought. And it was a waking thought. It was a dream. It was a moment of terror. Going like, oh my God. And being a librarian is a special moment in that technological awakening, in that we provide access and we explain complex ideas to humans. This is our day-to-day. And so I could see how this tool could really upend my profession and our role within universities and societies at large. And so thanks to the great colleagues at the library and the Applied AI Institute and partners like the Cinémathèque Québécoise, we actually studied how to set up a chatbot that would examine requests, queries from patrons. And this was a lab setting, so we didn't have it launched on the internet. We actually hired RAs to ask these fake chatbots, these setup chatbots, library-like questions to test this technology. And I was wondering, is this going to replace us? What does that mean for my profession? What can I bring back to librarians about the future of technology? And I was channeling this dread. I was channeling this fear that I then turned into opportunity. So that's why I'm here, because I was telling Paul about this on some chat system, and he was like, oh my God, you're going to talk about this. So the silver lining is to talk about this feeling of being replaced, and specifically this idea of public service and being in a public institution. So when I left the private sector to become a librarian and work in a university, I had a mentor who once said to me that the reason why they did that themselves was that in the private sector, you could choose the most profitable people to cater to. You could pick your clients. But in public service, there is no end to the need. There is always more you could do. You could always find communities that are underserved and provide them with a greater augmented experience. And so I just want to, that's like, if you want to remember one thing about my talk, is that public service is actually a great place to be in the Gen AI, reality augmented kind of universe, because there's always more that we could do to enhance the human experience. If I were in the private sector, I'd worry about my business being upended. In the public sector, we'll find something to do because humans will need us to do more for them. So that's kind of like the gist. And so what happened when we started playing with these chatbots that we had set up? So we hired some research assistants, and we started fiddling, and we fed it a couple of library websites and tried to see what they would say about that, and were they hallucinating, and did it make sense, and was it any good? And what was really fascinating is it was a great moment for us to discuss how we approached our own work. And so this moment became a weird moment where it was like casting a mirror onto ourselves. By looking at these machine-generated responses, we were like, well, wait a minute, how do you work? How do you answer these questions? What does it mean for you to be a librarian? And so it was this great moment where, in a sense, this became about us, not the capacity of the machine, but really what we could reflect about our own praxis. So that was a very, very strong and positive moment. So adding that as a second idea, the first idea was we can recast our resources to provide public service. That's the first idea. Second idea is it really becomes a reflection, a reflexive moment about our own praxis. And how do we self-identify the service we provide to our human compatriots? And how can these tools fit in to that? So that's a mirror unto ourselves. And finally, because I only have 5 minutes, I could talk about this for 5 hours, but you guys get the 5-minute version, right? Because he's going to start kicking me under the table. Last thing I want to talk about agency and power, right? I want to talk about this idea that we're losing ground. But think of generative AI and agentic AI and reality augmented AI and all that stuff as a way to shift how you cast your own power. And this is important for Concordia, because I think Concordia is a very special university in the ecosystem of universities in Montreal and Quebec and in Canada. We've always understood that a university education provides people with power, with agency, and it casts privilege onto their lives. And we've always been extra critical about seeing universities as guardrails of who gets in and out, who gets that privilege. And we've always wanted to cast that privilege onto as many people possible and accept as many people as we could of diverse backgrounds. And that's why I'm at Concordia myself, is because of this idea that Concordia is reflexive about the privilege that it provides by the education. And so I think generative AI is also a way to share the power and let people leverage their capacities and this is really a weird idea to say in a minute, right? Because Paul's going to start, is that generative AI augments everybody's capacity in a systematic way. And that is so amazing because everybody's a little bit more of an accountant and a little bit more of a doctor and a little bit more of a lawyer just because this tool is there. Now, there's still problems, you know, hallucinations and all that's there, but this systemic increase in human capacity across the board, that's like, wow. As a librarian, I'm like, oh my God, that's like saving me thousands of hours of work. My career is not being appended or replaced. It's being elevated in a way that I had not anticipated. And so, if you're afraid about these tools, the best thing that I could tell you is engage with them. Yes, go to the Udemy site, do the prompt engineering stuff, do all the, you know, the Gen AI. There's some great, that's what I did, by the way, to discover them. But I want to give you this message, is that generative AI is a way to elevate our capacity, celebrate the creation of this knowledge that is now in the hands of all these humans, and share with the power and agency of having these privileges, having these knowledge elements provided onto you. So let's not be afraid. Let's have some fun. Thank you. Oh yeah, questions.
That's great. We're open for questions if there are any on the floor or online.
Camirandans, welcome.
We have Jasia up here. Thank you.
I guess I'm curious, Olivier, what's the first way about if public institutions, we can always do more and meet more needs with these new tools, what's the first way you would advocate for, like, what's the first service you would add AI to in the library?
Well, I'm gonna shift that a little bit because I think there's a lot of service being provided by generative chatbots right now, by OpenAI and all those tools. So we have to recognize that. I think it's already happening. What's tricky though is those with a subscription get augmented access. So that's the part where I'm cringing a little bit because those with money can access a better tool than others, and that seems unfair to me. So I'm not exactly saying Concordia should get a Gen AI tool for everyone. I think we should develop our own in a weird way. I think we should just start challenging our community to come up with one of those types of tools. The other thing I'll say is we have to really think critically about the systems that we have in place right now. Like one of these, I co-wrote a paper with Anne-Louise Davidson about Moodle and how Moodle is a great tool for teaching. As a teacher, it tells you what to do. It's like this teaching tool, but as a learning tool, we could maybe augment the user experience. Like, why don't we have a dashboard that presents all the tasks to be done in a single, kind of environment? Why is it siloed into each individual Moodle? So it's still a teaching tool and it's not quite a learning tool. So we still have, our work to do on the systems that we do have. And I think Gen AI could have a play in that, but I think there's also just a straight up integration that could happen in the old school sense of IT. So Gen AI as a personal agent, I think it's already happening. People uploading articles, people uploading things to it and having that generative experience, but making sure it's across the board is, I think, one of the things we should focus on at Concordia.
Thanks, Olivier. That's great. I was wondering, it's a bit of a personal question for you, but when it becomes available and you're able to tap your brain into the big, AI server and just and be able to, are you gonna sign up for that? Are you gonna be one of these guys that would, jack into the,
like a chip?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
like
I think by then, when that happens, I'll already be in the woods because I'll be retired, right? I think before it passes all the Health Canada checks and the infection, like your skin doesn't get infected, all those little checks, I'll be old enough to go fishing instead, right? So that's going to be me. I've been very fortunate to have used CD-ROMs and have used card catalogs and have read things myself. I artisanally created a doctoral dissertation. So all those things are part of my personal experience, right? And I've tried a lot of crazy tools in the past couple of decades as a librarian, but I'm not sure I would go that far. I know my kids will. I know their kids will. And what I'll be curious about is to understand how their human experience is going to shift from mine. I'll be curious about that moment where there's something that I'm not experiencing that is not accessible to me as a human that others are. But that's already prevalent in society. There are people without smartphones. There are people without the knowledge of reading. Let's remember and celebrate that half of the Quebec and Canadian population, grosso modo, is functionally illiterate. And so, yes, we could think about the future and all these wonderful things, but I think there's institutional inertia and social inertia that we have to deal with. And I think that's where Concordia shines, honestly, right? I think like that embedded chip question is super interesting, but I'm gonna just flip it around and say, yes, but Concordia is here for all those others that may never experience that because of the question of privilege or access or some other dimension. And so I think that's where I'm like Concordia true. I'm like, let's do that. That's the part I want in, right? So sure, I want to think critically about those technologies because they're there, but let's experience the human experience of onboarding all of these people into this level of privilege and this level of access.
Thanks.
Thank you, Olivier. That was great.
Pleasure.
Over to you, Alice. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got some slides up today, and yes, I did create this image using generative AI. The prompt I gave it was to create like a sparring kind of scene and to have diverse subjects and for one of them to be kind of a cyborg. Because similar to something that Olivier said earlier, I do think that I am on the same kind of train of thought where I feel like generative AI is really enhancing everything that we do, and that's kind of the focus of my presentation today. In addition to JEDI. So I think a lot of us are familiar with equity, diversity, and inclusion, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sometimes we add accessibility to that. Has anyone seen JEDI before? Just show of hands. Okay, a couple of people. So I did kind of choose this image with that in mind, thinking about, that whole universe. But the addition of the J is really about justice. And I do think that this is kind of a critical thing to talk about these days because EDI, DEI, JEDI, all of these acronyms are kind of under fire a little at the moment. We see organizations rolling back on their commitments to equity, diversity, and inclusion in the private sector, in public service, down south. And so I promise this is more optimistic than it seems right now, but I do think that it's kind of having a moment and that it's important to kind of continue the discussion and keep it fresh in people's minds. And, we'll kind of work AI in there at some point as well. But just so that we kind of all start we all come to the table with the same amount of information, I'll just kind of show an image that I think really illustrates the concept of justice, and I'll give you a moment just to take a look at it. So the two blocks at the bottom, pretty similar outcome, right? We're seeing that the guy with the red pants and the guy with the blue pants, in both cases, they're both getting access to a resource or something that they need. And on the left-hand side, when it comes to equity, there's like this extra tool that we've added so that there's access for both folks there. But when it comes to justice, it's really about systemic change and changing the systems that create inequality in society. I think just to kind of comment on those two, since they're juxtaposed right beside each other, I think when it comes to folks feeling nervous about equity and maybe kind of speaking about it in a very emotional way, when you see someone has a ladder that's a little taller than yours, it can become the focus, I think, of your attention, rather than seeing that, hey, we both have access to what's above the apples. And so that's why I think justice is something that's a lot more effective to strive for. Not easy at all, of course. It is kind of a longer term plan. But in that way, everyone kind of feels that they're being served equitably because the system is there to support them in the same way. The way that I kind of came about this concept of JEDI and why I'm interested in justice is because it's a big part of the work that I do. So I do work in experiential learning. I've also taught at the undergraduate level in the Department of Education. But I'm also the co-founder of a program at Concordia called BTO, Beat the Odds. It's a work-integrated learning program where we identify students in equity groups and we give them essential employability skills, training, and then we send them off to do an internship. What's really special about this program is that we start with the student's need. We recognize that not everyone can kind of quit a part-time job to do an internship full-time for 3 months. And so we really start with the student's need and build the experience around it. And that's what really excites me about this moment in generative AI, because we can start to personalize student learning experiences. So how does generative AI kind of fit into all of this? Gen AI is kind of our buddy these days, right? It's helping us do things more quickly, efficiently, effectively. And that goes for staff, faculty, and students, right? And I know there's a bit of anxiety, I think, around how students are using generative AI, but they're kind of using it in the same way that we do. So there's not so much that I'm worried about in that case. But I've kind of created just a little chart around some of the ways that I like to use generative AI, and I think a lot of you can kind of relate to some of these. What I do want to spend a couple minutes talking about is this concept of going deeper, enhancing our learning. Deeper learning, what does that mean? Well, if we're thinking about generative AI as our buddy, it can help us by reviewing our work. It can give us detailed feedback, explain difficult concepts, and difficulty there exists on a spectrum. What's difficult for me might not be something that Olivier finds difficult or Paul finds difficult. It can also simulate a learning experience for us to kind of prepare us for the real thing eventually. I talked about internships earlier. And so these are kind of all of the ways that we want to show up for students, whether we're faculty members, whether we're staff members who are supporting students in their learning. But it's not always the case that we can show up in that way because there are structural barriers, right? There's time that's involved when we want to kind of sit side by side with a student and give them detailed feedback on their work. And so when it comes to this concept of justice, like how do we actually get there? I think what I'm really excited about in the world of generative AI, kind of joining the chat, is that it can really empower students to take full advantage of their experience, their entire experience at Concordia. And I'll take questions or comments now. If there isn't something that's kind of stood out for you, I might challenge you to think about how you might use generative AI to enhance the student experience that you provide, to enhance the experience that you provide to students at Concordia, or else how else can we empower students to make the most of the experience that they're having here? Thanks.
We have a question back here. Just gonna scoot around.
Hi, Alice. Thank you for that. I mean, this will be a general question to all three of you. Something I've experienced myself, I'm a learning experience designer and I work with professors at Concordia, and often they're talking to me about generative AI and its role it's playing in students' motivation and their happiness level and like their hope for the future. And I guess because this talk is about trying to be positive, I think that's my question to all of you. Like, how can I help the professors, help the students feel more hopeful and feel like they're not going to be replaced by generative AI in the future, for example, because we all are using it so much, how can they ignore the fact as like a 17-year-old going into university that in 5 years, the job they're training for might not exist anymore? So how do you like manage that balance? I know it's a really big question, but it's something I think about often, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, 5 years down the line is kind of difficult. There's just too much to kind of, things are just moving so quickly, it's kind of hard to say what actually is going to happen. I mean, we were talking about the chip implant, and it's funny how easily all of these kinds of thoughts that are in the realm of like science fiction can easily come to our minds, right? Thinking about plugging into the big, the big one, right? And that sort of thing. But I think, at least for me, like the first part of your question, when you're thinking about how to better support faculty in creating these experiences for students, something that I can kind of hone in on here is this question of deeper learning and simulating experiences. There's a lot of risk when we put students in an internship or when we have an external organization come into the classroom and give students, I don't know, data to analyze or a real problem that their organization is facing for students to kind of solve and think through and figure out and provide solutions to. And so there are a lot of risks because people are just so unpredictable. So like the organization could just back out and say, okay, I lost a bunch of staff, sorry, I can't continue this project with your students. And the students lose out on that experience, right? Likewise, if this organization comes to engage with a group of students in your class and the students aren't performing at a level that is kind of meeting their expectations, well then that's something that you have to manage as an instructor, right? You have to kind of placate them and negotiate and help them kind of work through that frustration. And I think that when it comes to using generative AI to simulate experiences, it's a great way to just kind of give students an opportunity to make mistakes. And I feel like there's always that F kind of hanging over our heads when we're students, right? Like figurative and a real F, because you can fail a course, of course, right? And so creating these opportunities where students can fail in a safe space and get feedback and try again before we actually put them in a situation that's really where the stakes are so much higher. I think if we're thinking about what the future is going to look like, and we don't know what it's going to look like, but how can we better prepare for it? It's creating these experiences where people aren't afraid to innovate and to try new things and to be exposed to new technologies and new ways of doing things. And these are great lifelong skills to build. And so as the nature of our work changes, we need to be able to adapt to that, right? And we're already seeing that today where like, folks who are able to use generative AI technologies are faring better than folks who are refusing to use them or are nervous about using them or don't know how to use them, right? And so that will only continue to grow in that direction. So I hope I answered everything that was part of your question, because I know it's a big one, and I'll just pass it over to anyone else who wants to answer as well.
Do you want to add something?
I can give it a shot. I really like Ethan Mollick's take in his book Co-Intelligence, and a lot of his scholarship around this idea of working with generative AI. So one of the studies that Ethan Mollick did, he's a professor at Wharton, University of Pennsylvania Business School, and he worked with consultants to determine the impact of using generative AI on their work. And what was determined is, and of course consultants would be graded from 1 to 5. 5 being like you have lots of stuff to work on, and 1 is our elite consultants. And so the lower they scored on their personal capacities, the more generative AI had an impact on their on the quality of their work. All right. So the elite consultants, even if they used generative AI, it didn't really improve their capacities. So this introduces the opportunity to co-create or co-write your own future in this job that you will discover. So having your work being replaced is actually a benefit, because you let go of things that you could spend your brain on and provide more human impact into the machine tool. And so this idea that you're collaborating with the tool to create a new future is actually really exciting. It's hard to sell as an idea, right? But it will allow people to provide for better quality, more impactful contributions to their employer. And how that happens is up to the individual. So if I tell you, oh, you're never going to get a job because AI is going to eat your lunch, everybody gets depressed, we have to take pills, I don't want that. But if you say, you know what, generative AI will let you understand where you're better, where you rock, and the parts that maybe you're struggling, that's going to get better too. And that's going to let you figure out how to contribute to society. I'm not going to tell you how. You have to figure out. That's your challenge. But the parts where you were struggling and you thought you were going to hold you back, those are no longer going to hold you back. So that's going to liberate you and propel you in places that you never imagined. So go ahead. Go ahead and prove everybody wrong and find that thing that you're amazing at, which you'll only discover if you use these tools. I sell encyclopedias. That's what I do, right? So I'm a librarian. I sell encyclopedias, right? So there you go.
Thanks, Olivier. I think for me, if I was going to answer that, I think the trajectory of my work has gone from really technical focused and so on, and as I've gone through like my career, I'm more and more interested in people, and my focus is increasingly around people, and I think that there's something to that. I think technical aspects of things and being actually liberated to focus on each other and so on. I think that that's a nice side of things, and we're already seeing that work is changing. People used to stay in the same place for their entire careers. I mean, I should be one to talk. I'm hitting 25 years soon, but it's like, but all that to say, like, people are changing, but, I've changed jobs over those 25 years. I've explored interests, and I think that's one of the opportunities, is being able to move towards different areas of interest and so on. So I think that there's a nice aspect, but I think part of focus has to be on other people. The later I am in my career, how I work with other people is actually a better metric of success than anything else, even if you're technically brilliant and so on. Now, I think where we'll get in trouble is when AIs are, better with people than we are. That's going to be an issue, and that's not impossible. But I do think it's a talent we naturally have and we should be cultivating, and I think that that's where a difference maker can come in. So, good. I think we'll leave it at that for that one. And thank you, Alice. Could I borrow the clicker, please? Wonderful. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so my topic's going to be slightly different. It does have some links to AI, but what I'm curious about, what I'm hopeful and optimistic about, is really about data in general and what's happening in the data space these days. So just to start, on the problem statement around this, and we've seen this, there's still some open questions about how these AI tools were created using data that was publicly available, trained on massive amounts of text, which cost the companies absolutely nothing. They just harvested all our information, sometimes academic papers and so on. So I tend to see some of the current data practices as a tool of economic extraction. And I think that's a problem. And I think it's a problem we should be all concerned about. So here, just companies profit from our data in exchange for a fraction of what they give us in return as a free service. So think about your social media accounts, anything where the company, like Facebook, would package your data and sell that off and make some money off of it, right? So they profit from it. And we actually get a really poor return on what we give up. We give up a lot of value in exchange for really, you know, I don't know if you've been on Facebook lately, but it's terrible in terms of what's on the feed. Also, companies win because they collect data at scale. That means that they create value because at scale, that data is worth more than it is individually, right? Individually managing and selling our own data is more costly than what it would be worth. And this is something, thank you, Olivier. I've had lots of conversations with Olivier about this, so he's also a very good person to keep chatting about on this. So that's a challenge individually, right? And then our data is also used as an alternative form of currency. And we see this in multiple examples where companies exchange data and they avoid paying taxes. That means, like, economically, we're also getting robbed from revenue that should be going to, you know, services that we all share and benefit from. So there's a lot of issues around that. But I'm hopeful about this. So what's changing this? Sorry, I'm just trying to sync up. There are a number of things right now that are changing on the landscape, and we'll start with personal data rights and privacy laws. GDPR is a European law that gives people the right to control their personal data and requires companies to protect it, right? It's a law, it was actually the first law that came out a number of years ago, forced all the international companies who were collecting data, if they had European clients, they had to change their data practices and put that in place. In the same vein, Quebec came up with Law 25, which is really, comparatively speaking, one of the best laws out there for data protection for people. And I think that's something that really Quebec takes a lot of pride in. It takes our data consent and privacy laws. So that law has been in place, and we're currently working on a project to implement it at Concordia in the public sector, and it's also applicable to the private sector. There's also other organizations. There's a global movement called My Data, which helps people take back control of their personal data and decide who can use it. And then there's OCAP, which is specifically aimed at Indigenous people, First Nations in Canada. That kind of it's a rule that says that they own, control, access, and manage all their own data. So there's a number of initiatives. Now, personal data rights and privacy laws are great because they protect your data, and they prevent companies from, you know, absolutely controlling it. But what they don't do, unfortunately, is they don't give you a mechanism from profiting from your data economically. It puts some safeguards in place, but it doesn't actually enable you to profit from it economically. So this was actually my entry point into this. So I have a colleague, Vanessa Raymond, who worked in the Abundant Intelligences research program, and she put me onto this article. And it was basically a paper written by these folks. It was about designing a business-to-consumer system architecture for your data. So basically, it was designing an entire system where you would be able to sell and get revenue out of your data. And it set up everything around that. So it was meant to address the limitations of data rights and privacy laws that prevented people from profiting economically from their data. And this is just to show, this is the entire architecture. Like, this was not just a thought exercise or anything, but they really broke it down into a full architecture, what different roles needed to be created, how the information would be cleaned, how it would be commercialized, how the licenses would be negotiated. And the whole paper was about, you know, they asked a number of subject matter experts to really criticize it and see, you know, where the gaps were. And the idea was to come up with design principles. So it's a more transparent and human-centric ecosystem where people get to decide how their data is used. You're compensated for sharing your data. You can automate permissions and reduce complexity, rely on independent intermediaries to ensure transparency, and have secure, decentralized data storage options. So that's to me, that was like, oh my God, somebody's done all the work in terms of thinking about how we could actually change the narrative around this, right? Now, it doesn't come, it has its own, by the way, if Ping is still here, this is all morphed, so thank you for your presentation before. But, the roles here, we could see that were created from that. So they created a data owner, which is you, the individual, the providers, brokers, registrars, fiduciaries. There's a vocabulary curator in there, data quality controller, workbench provider, the consumer, and then all the technical legal people you need to make that machine run. But it creates jobs, it creates roles, it creates like a system around that. So ultimately, I was just really enamored with the idea that there's actually a model out there we could start talking about and considering. Now, it's not a perfect model. There's some challenges with this, and it's acknowledged in the paper, but it does require a high level of digital literacy and access to technology, some of the inequity stuff that Olivier was talking about. You still need people to actively manage their data, which is not, it's adding another thing to your day. There's some technical proficiency that comes with it. There's also a power imbalance. It doesn't solve the power imbalance that you're negotiating with companies for your individual piece of data. And on its own, it's not worth what it would be as a collective, right? At scale, your individual data doesn't have the same value proposition, right? And it also requires, like I said, your active participation and consistent monitoring. You need to, in the paper, you needed to check in, log in weekly or daily, look at the rates you're being offered for your data, the services that you use that collect your data. You need to be able to get your data out. There's a whole bunch of stuff that are challenges with that. So it's not a perfect system, but it's kind of still interesting in its own way. Now, to me, what's really interesting as a next step is really thinking about community-centered data governance models around that. So there's different kinds, but the two main kinds actually are data trusts. And a data trust is a trusted group that manages data for people to keep it safe and for it to be used fairly. But usually the big distinction here is that the trust makes sure that you're getting revenue out of it, that you're maximizing the value of your data. And because it's in a trust with other people, you actually profit from collectively bargaining and negotiating at that point. So the engine of a data trust is actually a really interesting way for us to get economic value out of our individual data and negotiate it at scale. Data commons are very similar, except that they tend to be really for not-for-profit applications. So a data commons is really like anonymized health data because it helps research, or something that universities could use or governments can use to improve their services type of stuff. But it's still the idea that as a group you control what happens to your data and you have a say into who uses it and so on. So that's a really interesting mechanism for that. And then there's care principles, and again, care principles is a rule to make sure that indigenous communities have control over their data. And often it's paired up with FAIR, which is really how research data is used, which is findable, accessible, interpretable, and reusable. And then CARE, which is collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And that's something that's used a lot for indigenous communities, and it's very tightly associated with the idea of data sovereignty around that. So for me, the reason I think this is something to be optimistic about is I think we're having an increasing amount of conversations about what our data is, because everybody's making money off of our data. And we're kind of being taken to the cleaners around this stuff. And so I think it's important for us to pay attention to how data is used, not only on the outside, not only in social services, but also Concordia, how we're helping people be aware of how their data is used, how we're using it to improve services, but also what it means collectively to have to control how our data is used and so on. And so there's kind of different mechanisms around that. So yeah, so by embracing community-centered data governance model, we can reduce the complexity for individual users, ensure fairer compensation for data sharing, protect against corporate exploitation, improve collective bargaining power, and enable ethical and community-driven data practices. And that's it. Yeah. Happy to take questions, and I'm sure. Do you have a question? Okay. Jasia. Yeah.
Have to use the microphone. So I thought it was a really interesting presentation, Paul. Thank you. You took a topic that is on many of my list of things that are broken in the world, but there's nothing we can do about it. And you presented some really interesting alternatives. How optimistic should we be about any of this actually being implemented?
That's a really good question. I think in preparing this presentation, I was really something that I was that I got excited about was this idea, you know, right now we sign up to these social media platforms and so on, and we sign away our data. But what if we develop platforms like that actually were built on the premise that the data we collect, we're going to put in a trust, and as a user of our service, you're going to have some say into how your data is used collectively. As a value proposition for people, and maybe even say the profits that we make off of this data that you agree to share type of stuff will actually be returned to you as payments. So it's not about paying for a service, it's about, you know, it's this idea of cooperative or something like that is we're going to use this platform together, we're going to generate data, and the value we create from this data is actually going to come back to us as a way of making, like, I think as a consumer, there's something interesting in there because the idea that I would actually get some money out of this or some value out of this at the end, and it might take years, you know, there's initial costs, there's scaling and all that, but just putting that forward as a proposition, I would be excited about that kind of platform and that kind of use. So I think that there's a way to make that attractive to the average consumer and make that a marketing strategy and making it a selling point for different platforms, which are options we're not being presented with right now. You know, it says like, you know, we'll connect you to your friends and we'll give you some funny stories once in a while, but there's something else that could be interesting there.
Less of a question, more of a comment, but there's a real-world example called Brave Browser, which provides like cryptocurrency for you to opt into ads, for example. So you get tailored ads that you select, and if you watch them, you'll get paid to do it. It's not a massively popular browser, but it's a real-world example of being paid for your data, like you said, right? Yeah. You've opted into these ads, and now you'll be compensated. So I think that's something that big companies can model and move towards. But like you said, is it being widely adopted? Not so much, but.
I think as more and more people realize, and I think some of the pressures in terms of, you know, work changing and this idea that, you know, you see, you know, a lot of the wealth gap increasing, I think that's going to put some pressures in terms of people are going to say like, you know, all these people are profiting from our data, and we're actually not getting our fair share here. And I think that there's a pressure building around that. And I'm actually hopeful that either legislation or rules or just better business models that reward people and compensate them fairly will, even if it means that, you know, a government needs to develop these platforms at some point. I think, you know, for a government to do this is like they retain the value of their citizens, they use this information for the benefit of their citizens, and they create value for them. I think there's something interesting in there that's worth exploring.
Hi, sorry. I'm just trying to look at it from the negative side. So, as a father,
yes.
Imagine there is a way that I can monetize the existence of my kids on social media. Let's say social media. So the more pictures I put from there, the more products I buy for them and I advertise. So I bought these diapers, I bought these toys, I went to this place, I went there. So don't you think there's gonna be, if there is money involved, there's gonna be people misusing it, especially when it comes to their kids, minors, people who are, let's say, not as able as they are. I mean, like people who are, you know what I mean, mostly children, because I'm father, and I think there will be, because honestly, there are lots of parents who are already showcasing their kids' life, you know what I mean? So it's gonna be way more.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I think you're 100% right. Right now, there's an influencer culture that really is making a living out of, you know, showcasing their families, their children, and so on. And undeniably, it's a problem. And using you know, so I think there's a difference between kind of being, there's your data normalized across a larger set at scale versus really eyeballs and clicks, right? And I just want to make that distinction. I think the eyeballs and clicks and the clickbait is, and the influencer kind of market is extremely problematic. And 100%, this might, it depends how we build, but on you know, just your activity data as somebody on a platform and not about, you know, how many followers you have, how many, like I think that's a fine line, but it's a fuzzy line at best. So I think you're absolutely right to be cautious about that. But I'm focused on the idea that, you know, normalized data across a large set, this is what I'm targeting, but I 100% agree that there's a huge issue there. Yeah, absolutely. Ooh, Rachel, I think that.
So, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So decision making can be hard for one person, harder yet when two people try to make a decision, and then harder still when you have a large enough data set that it's significant. Mm-hmm. So what are some of your thoughts or strategies around the amount of people that would need to agree for decision-making protocols on either the trust, the commons, or the care options?
Yeah, I think that's about, I think it's a great question because you're reproducing kind of the issue in terms of like what choices and, you know, I think part of it could be in selecting the right data trust. If this is a model that scales enough and there's enough options, then this is something that you can make choices on in terms of which kind of data trust. But even in data commons, like you can abstract to larger categories. Like this category of use for my data is fine, but this category is not. So there might be some mechanisms there where you can, you know, at a high level kind of direct where your data can be used or not. But yeah, it's not perfect, and there's you know, how granularly you get is really a reflection of how much time you want to invest and get into it. But I think you can tailor that. So if I just want to set it and forget it, like there's charities like that, right? Giving Well, you could choose the types of charities that you're interested in, and then, you know, your donations go into those categories because those are causes you believe in and you think that they're fair. So I think there's something interesting in that model in terms of really being able to target what kind of uses your data is. And part of that could be a choice of data commons or data trust, but it could also be, you know, more granular if you want it to be. Can I jump in? Yes.
Curious
Yeah.
to say something. And
So thanks for the question, Rachel, and Paul, also for the great presentation. I mean, one of the things you accomplished for me is you actually made me excited about the privacy impact assessment process. So thank you for that. Like now I feel like, wow, I do want to go through a PIA because that's cool. It's empowering data. But I wanted to talk about Rachel's question because it weirdly links with kind of how I've been, and you've presented your talk, like we've talked about your talk already, so I know a lot of things about it. I think one of the things that is happening at Concordia, which is really exciting, so speaking of this kind of like friendly futures, is this idea of open data. And this idea that we're now having this conversation about how research data fits into different kinds of processes happening at the university. And it also speaks to like other possibilities of like what are the flows of documents and creation that are happening at the university, and thinking about privacy. If we shift the way how we think about privacy, it becomes an opportunity to create these trusts and commons that you've mentioned. And I think that's really the virtue that we'll have to think hard about for the next, well, 2 generations, but no, for the next while, because how we see, like, I'm just gonna say it's like an undergraduate student paper at the end of a semester. It's a throwaway document. We have all these humans creating all these documents that we're basically grading and throwing away. And we need to shift that. That's a lot of human processing power that's just being discarded. And I see that as wasteful, right? So if you think about there are privacy elements in there. Now they have value because they're human documents. And they're also generating content, which could lead to some form of like AI tool. So I think where I'm trying to get at with Rachel's question and your talk is that this privacy situation where the government is saying, hey, wait a minute, this is worth something. We'll give agency to humans to curate their own future with their own data. Well, I think it's on to us, the people at Concordia, to look at the privacy situations that we have at hand and how we could shift that into a value proposition for the students in the community, especially these days, right? So like the Office of the Registrar, well, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of humans with addresses. I'm not telling to sell that. But we could think about what it means to have a conversation with our constituents, with our learners, with our researchers, say, well, what does that mean to have this data here? Is there any value? And what would be an ethical use of that? I think that's a really interesting challenge that like your talk is making me realize right now. So not really an answer, sorry, but more hope and friendly futures.
I think we'll call it a day. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Olivier and Alice. Thank you for your questions. And yeah, I don't know, Jasia, did you want to wrap up?
I'm just going to sneak in here really quickly. We'll keep it very brief. Thank you, everyone, presenters, attendees, Fourth Space team. It was an amazing day. And we'll pick it up tomorrow morning. Everything's virtual, so go to the registration site and you should be able to access the sessions from there. I look forward to seeing you guys all online.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us for Digital Skillshare Days. As Jasia said, you should be joining online tomorrow at the appropriate place, so we look forward to seeing that. Thank you for coming into Fourth Space, and thank you to those who joined us online as well for activating this conversation, asking questions, participating, and yeah, this was great. We will be going ahead closing up that Zoom and the live stream now, but just a quick reminder that this full day is already available on our YouTube channel if you'd like to revisit or share it. We hope to be able to see you again soon at Fourth Space. Thank you so much and have a great day.